Chapter 115. A genius will remember love in 1 second divided by little. Say net, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Zhang Qingrui had entered a state that completely subverted her cognition. Love, go little say, W. Chushi suddenly had a creepy feeling about the conversation between Luoqiu and Professor Qin Fong. However, the woman called Yi kept looking at her with a faint smile, which made Zhang Qingrui's body stiffen. She felt that the grassland was particularly cold at this moment. And some miraculous things happened. She saw Luoqiu stretch out his hand and gently wipe Professor Qin Fong's eyes. Professor Qin Fong then regained his vision. This rapid change made Zhang Qingrui feel like those who sold fake medicines on the street and played a double act with a shill. But of course it was not fake. After Professor Qin Fong regained his vision, he became silent. Not long after, Professor Qin Fong suddenly walked towards those who were beaten to the ground. Zhang Qingrui saw a trace of gloomy expression on the professor's face, asking subconsciously, "What does he want to do?" "You better go back to the car," Luoqiu said indifferently, "but if you can accept it, it's okay to watch." Zhang Qingrui opened her mouth, but soon understood the real meaning of this sentence. Professor Qin Fong shot one by one on the forehead of these fallen men without hesitation. Simply speaking, he was killing them. She once heard from her grandmother that some of those who were in this business were very rampant. It was common for several people to die, and it was also not uncommon for a group of people to be killed. But her family only needed the buried treasures and didn't care about the rest. Of course, it was much more civilized now, but the dangers of this business had never disappeared. Ms. Zhang had lived for at most 21 years. How could she be said to have mastered the skill of calming down? At this moment, she restrained herself from screaming. She felt that this was the best result she could give to her grandmother. At this moment, Professor Qin Fong walked back. His face didn't show any trace of killing. He said calmly, "They have more people. I suspect that they may have been waiting near the entrance of the ancient tomb. If these guys don't send a message back after a while, the people over there should be aware of something." "Rest assured, Mr. Qin," Yi comforted him on behalf of her boss. "Since we have promised you, we will naturally fulfill your wish." "Then let's go." Professor Qin Fong nodded. After a moment of hesitation, he asked, "Is Chiyu also nearby?" Luoqiu didn't answer the question. "Professor, can you still drive?" Professor Qin Fong frowned, but didn't ask further. He just said indifferently, "I need to rest and recover my strength." Luoqiu nodded. However, what she didn't expect was that she was the one driving the Wrangler. "I don't have a driver's license, so I can't drive this kind of car." These were the words of Boss Luo. "Well, if the owner doesn't drive, I won't drive either." These were the words of Miss Servant Girl. So what the hell was the owner? This was definitely the most wonderful and the worst experience in her life. Qingrui couldn't help but sigh. However, the wonderful thing was that until now, her fears seemed to be fading away, and the excitement in her heart was gradually growing stronger. Luoqiu and the professor were sitting at the back seat, talking. In fact, it was more of Professor Qin Fong's one-sided narration, where he knew that he didn't have long to live, so he wanted to leave his story. That was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, Professor Qin Fong was already a well-known expert in the underworld. However, in this field, many people chose to use code names and wouldn't reveal their real identities. At first, there were only 2 people who went through fire and water together. Later, the team gradually grew. They weren't satisfied with just excavating some things from hundreds of years ago, so they planned to target things from thousands of years ago. My partner, Gao Rue, found a bronze bracelet in the market, but he accidentally knocked it over in the process of transportation, causing the base to break. However, it was precisely because of this that everything started. The professor was immersed in his own memories. We found a map from the broken base. The bronze bracelet should be an item from the period of the 3 kingdoms. What was recorded on the map might be a treasure, a graveyard, or something more wonderful. The professor's face suddenly revealed a trace of a smile. I can still remember the excitement on Gao Rue's face at that time. But how could I blame him? because I couldn't wait for it myself. We studied it for more than a year and flipped through a lot of ancient books. Finally, we locked the location marked on the map. Professor Chin Fong paused for a while before continuing slowly. Because Gao Rui just got married, we didn't set off until the child was 1 year old. I remember it was the beginning of autumn, and it rained. The child's name hadn't been decided since she was born. On the day of setting off, Gao Rui felt that it wouldn't work, so he changed her name to Chiyu. Me, Gao Rui, his wife, and 5 other brothers hurried to the prairie without stopping after getting the exit permit. Professor Chin Fong looked at the completely darkened scenery outside the window. It's this prairie. As I recall, we had been exploring this area for a full 2 months. At that time, some people in the team had become impatient and started to question the authenticity of this map from nearly 2,000 years ago. Gao Rui's wife missed the child at home and wanted to go back. They had quarreled several times because of this matter. Then, after about a month, even I started to feel discouraged. Professor Chin's face changed while speaking of this. I remember that night. Just like this night, it was so quiet that it made people depressed and fearful. We were discussing about leaving by the bonfire. After searching for 3 months, the new year was coming. We all wanted to go home, especially those with families. However, when we were about to make a decision, one of our brothers who went to the toilet ran back in a panic. Professor Chin Fong stared at Luo Chiao. His eyes were filled with the same color and excitement as when he was young. He said he found something on a hillside nearby. What did we see? Professor Chin Fong took a deep breath. What we saw. I think everyone had the same thought as me. That is, we'll never forget that scene for the rest of our lives. Although the professor's words sounded like the last words of a dying man, Luochio still felt uncomfortable. Hurry up and say it. A wolf. A glowing wolf with white light all over, looking up to the sky. Yin 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 P.S. 3/4. Chapter 116. Genius remembers love in 1 second divided by little. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. A glowing wolf? Hearing this, Yi slightly turned her head from the front passenger seat. But she also stretched out her arms, holding the steering wheel. Because at this moment, Ms. Zhang, who had been listening, was also startled. The Wrangler drove straight ahead and was about to hit a big mud pit. It obviously knew how to drive. Anyway, it dodged it. Professor Chin Fong didn't care about this, but continued. Yes, it emitted white brilliance. We found it, and it found us. It turned its head, looking down at us from above, its eyes full of spirituality. Rather than looking at us, it was better to say it was sizing us up. Wolf is the totem of the Xiongnu people. Professor Chin Fong said slowly. That night was a full moon, and it appeared at the place we were looking for. We were almost sure that the ancient map must be real. Then that light wolf suddenly jumped down from the hillside towards us. It leaped over us, running towards a direction. We hurriedly chased after it, and because of this chase, we finally found the place marked on the map. That ancient tomb buried under the ground. In the history of the Xiongnu people, it was the tomb of one of the left virtuous kings. And it was a tomb that had never been robbed. An unprecedented sense of excitement almost destroyed our rationality. Professor Chin Fong's face turned gloomy. Gao Rui was the best and the boldest one among us. We dug a hole, and after the air inside was almost replaced, Gao Rui took the lead and walked in. We had never thought that in that era, it was possible to build such a complicated tomb. Rather than a tomb, it was better to say it was a complete underground palace. The passages inside were complicated and changeable. We were trapped inside for a long time, but we didn't see that light wolf. At this time, we saw that the food was almost used up, but we still couldn't find the direction. The professor looked out of the window. It's like there's some kind of power that's stopping us. In that labyrinth, we looked again and again at the marks we had made, proving that we had always been in the same place and had not advanced much. We could not even find the way back. And at this time, something even worse happened to us. Wolf, the light wolf that we have seen before. Not just one, but in large quantities. They rushed out from the surrounding walls. They could freely shuttle through the walls. They were flying towards us, biting our bodies. Pain. Bullets were completely useless against these light wolves. When the dagger pierced into their bodies, it was like stabbing into water. We can only run. Keep running. Do you know? Professor Chin looked at Luochio and suddenly said with a bitter smile, when a person is in despair, no matter how crazy the decision is, if we are trapped here, it is only a matter of time before we are trapped in that underground palace and die. Without any other choice, we decided to use the explosives we brought with us to blow out a way out. Do you know the consequences of using explosives in the underground palace? Professor Chin Fong looked at Luochio and asked. Probably it will collapse. Luochio imagined the scene at that time. Professor Chin Fong seemed to be grieved by the scene at that time, so he just nodded. In the end, only Gao Rui's wife and I survived. In fact, his wife was also seriously injured at that time and couldn't survive. I was the only one in the team who survived. The professor sighed. All these years, what happened that night has become a nightmare for me. I can never forget the pain of despair and the pain of losing my good brothers. I can't let their bones be hidden in the underground of a foreign country. I must find a way to bring their bones out and bring them back home. It's just that after we blew up that place, the whole place collapsed. At that time, the international environment was not very good, so it was impossible to excavate on a large scale. The underground technology was also not as advanced as now. The professor shook his head. At that time, I was also injured and hurried to bury Gao Rui's wife. Also, the orphan they left behind needed to be taken care of, so I had no choice but to leave temporarily. All these years, I would come here whenever I had time, hoping to find another way in. Just a few months ago, when I came here again, I met another group of people. I don't know where they got this place from. Perhaps there was more than one map that was passed down. Anyway, they didn't tell the source. At the beginning, we had some conflicts. Later on, I saw that this group of people had very good equipment in their hands. They even had large excavating tools. Professor Chin frowned. Among them, there were also people from our country, but there were also quite a few foreigners. I'm afraid this is a group of foreign treasure thieves. Also, it is said that the nearby land was bought by the company behind them. I just wanted to go to the underground palace again and bring Gao Rui and the others out, so I chose to cooperate with them in the end. Because I had entered the past before, I explained my situation. I only wanted corpses and nothing else, so they agreed to my request. With the help of those fellows, we were able to dig up a piece of land that had collapsed back then. Once again, I could step into this nightmare place. The original maze was already buried because of the collapsed soil. Not to mention finding a way, even digging up something was very difficult. The group of people began to use other equipment to explore the excavated area. In the end, they found an unexpected result. This underground palace under the buried area, there was another level. This discovery is too shocking. A 2-level and huge underground palace. We have no way of imagining what methods the ancient people used to create such a magnificent building in that distant era. How did they calculate those support points? How did they design that kind of maze that could make people lose their way? But there is one thing that can be incomparably certain. That is, if they can create such a complicated underground palace, then what is hidden inside is probably not as simple as an ordinary ancient relic. They couldn't wait to dig again and directly blew up the first level of the underground palace. I also followed them and went deep into the second level of the underground palace. This skeleton was found in the second level of the underground palace at that time. What was found was a stone coffin, which was already opened and buried in the first level of mud and stone. I guess I'm afraid that when Gao Rui and I blew it up, it shook the surrounding weak points and caused a collapse, so this coffin was buried. They carefully moved this broken coffin and the mud and stone out first. After all, it was the first thing found. Then I followed them and began to explore this second level of the maze. However, we once again encountered those light wolves from back then. I told them the horror of this kind of thing, but these people didn't believe me and planned to fight back with the advanced weapons in their hands. Professor Chin Fong smiled bitterly. but I've seen the horror of these light wolves, so I escape alone. Later, there was no news from those people. Seeing that the situation was not good, I took advantage of the chaos and escaped back alone with the coffin. You know what happened later? Luaccio nodded, starting to digest this information. At this moment, the Wrangler suddenly braked. Zhang Qingrui in the front turned her head. It seems that we've arrived, and the situation seems to be not good. In front of them was a huge pit, and at this moment, a huge buzzing sound came out from that huge pit. Following that, two bright lights appeared. A helicopter slowly rose from the huge crater. On both sides of the door of the helicopter, there were two men with automatic rifles in their hands. They were clearly aiming at the small Wrangler. Professor Qin Fong, you're finally here. I know you'll come back. Have you brought back the thing you stole from us? Yin Yin PS. 4/4. I feel like my body is hollowed out. Chapter 117. A genius remembers love in 1 second /small. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. The helicopter's rotors rotated rapidly. The strong airflow raised clouds of dust. It was the first time for Luaccio to see a helicopter in such a close distance. Therefore, he wasn't nervous at all. He didn't know when he started to lose his nervousness. Perhaps it was after he was shot in the head by Jin Zifu in the first transaction and came back to life. Or perhaps it was after he protected Luo Dance for the first time and fought with the Mantis monster. Let's get off first, Luaccio said calmly. Soon, two tall and strong men were released from the helicopter with ropes. Of course, they were aiming at Luaccio's group, who came down from the Wrangler with guns. Thank you for your cooperation. Looking at the several people who came down from the Wrangler standing aside quietly, the man who kept talking on the helicopter said with a pleasant voice. Then, he slid down with a rope. He was a typical Westerner, about 35 or 36 years old. Professor Qin Fong frowned, asking Luaccio beside him, "Are we not going to resist?" Luaccio looked at the inside of the pit from here. This pit was deeper than he had imagined. Perhaps the underground palace was originally located in this big pit. Later, Professor Qin's group bombed the first floor and caused it to collapse. It should have sunk a lot in the past 20 years. Indeed, many heavy equipment were set up in the corner of the pit, and there were two prefabricated houses for rest. Rather than saying that this treasure-stealing group was professional, it was better to say that they were rich and overbearing. Isn't our purpose to go down? Luaccio said calmly, and we don't plan to stay here forever. If we resist, we will break our own car at the beginning, and it will be troublesome when we leave. Professor Qin Fong gave a start. Generally, when encountering such a situation, the first thing to consider should be their own safety. This student of his actually considered whether the car would be broken or not. Let's talk about it later. Boss Luo added directly. Professor, you said that you wouldn't want the things in the underground palace of the ancient tomb. But in fact, you did take away his hard work. So I don't think there's anything wrong with her being angry. Even if there is something wrong, shouldn't the victim be this tomb that was disturbed? Professor Qin Fong suddenly felt speechless. Zhang Qingrui, who had been listening to their conversation, had only one thought in her mind. This was indeed the Luo she knew. Although looking at the fully armed appearance of this group of thieves, he was very worried. But seeing Luaccio and Yuye's calm appearance, he inexplicably felt a sense of security. That man is Snyder, their leader, Professor Qin Fong said, while looking at the man who came down last. In fact, Snyder was walking towards them at this moment. The two men behind him held their guns in both hands and pressed them against their chests. Boss Luo, who liked to look around, noticed that the strides of the two men with guns were almost the same. The way they held their guns was so standard that they looked like soldiers waiting for a military parade. At least, they were people who had received strict military training. Snade walked in front of them, glancing at them, and then emphasized in a strange Mandarin, "It seems that Professor Qin Fong has found a lot of helpers. Did you come back this time because you found something new? The things that were stolen from us." Professor Qin nodded, suddenly asking, "After that, did you go down again?" Snade thought for a while. "Yes, we continued to send another team down, but then there was no news. In the end, the communications device only picked up some screams and words of unknown meaning. Later on, we used drones to investigate and found the corpses of the people in front. They were shot to death by their companions. Shot to death? Professor Chin frowned, but he didn't want to continue asking about the cause of death. If there was a mysterious force guarding the underground palace of the ancient tomb, then there was another mysterious force beside him. His blind eyes recovered, and the ancient parchment contract that appeared out of thin air, although it was all because of a transaction. I plan to go down again. Professor Chin Fong suddenly said, I don't want to have another conflict with you here. You just want to know what's buried in the underground palace. Snade seemed to have expected such words. He clapped his hands, smiling. Since Professor Chin stole that thing, I have a premonition that you'll bring me another surprise. If so, please go down. He made a gesture of invitation. At the same time, a ladder slowly rose up from the pit. Snade's men were more numerous than imagined. The people here were like a joint force of many countries. But no matter the prefab house, the new equipment, their clothes, or even the helicopter, that they didn't find any mark. Luochio thought it was good. At least they knew how to hide their identity and wouldn't tell others their origin. Of course, it wasn't good for the four of them who had been targeted by many weapons at close range. I've always wanted to ask you a question. Luochio looked at Zhang Qingrui, who walked to his side, thinking that it was not easy for her to wait until now to take the initiative. Therefore, he replied with a yes. What you do? Luochio answered without thinking. Well, recently I've accepted some special business and started to sell some strange things. Like the professor who suddenly recovered his eyesight. Is it also counted? Zhang Qingrui gave a start. To be exact, it's some free gifts. Luochio said indifferently. The professor's price is a bit high, and we don't want to do business of cheating customers. Zhang Qingrui gave a start. She hesitated for a moment before plucking up her courage to ask, why are you willing to tell me these? Luochio said in the usual tone, the tone of a classmate. Nothing, you'll forget it after the business here is over. Forget? What do you mean? Is that guy still there these 2 days? Is he still with you? Luochio directly interrupted her question. This was a skill that he had developed over the years. There was a woman at home who was eloquent and had a much greater desire for exploration than him. Therefore, Boss Luo had learned to use some questions that others had to pay attention to interrupt other people's own questions. Sure enough, when it came to herself, Zhang Qingrui couldn't help but pay more attention to it. She subconsciously looked at the box with the skeleton in it, which was carried by several men. I've had some strange dreams. Zhang Qingrui said with a bitter smile. In my dreams, I even heard the sound of that ancient song, and someone was playing it. On the first day, when you went to the professor's house, you wrote the sentence, Hu Jia 18 beats. I was wondering whether you had already known a lot of things since then. But then I realized that it was I who took you to the professor's house. If I didn't take you there, would you be here now? Here we are. Luochio didn't say anything to comfort her. In front of them was the entrance to the underground palace dug out by Snade's group. From this entrance, a wisp of gloomy and cold air could be faintly seen. Looking at this entrance, Luochio felt something heavy. Vaguely, he seemed to understand why Qin Shiyu chose to let Professor Qin fulfill his wish in a roundabout way. He was afraid that Qin Shiyu would find it very unfriendly. But right at that moment, Zhang Qingrui suddenly jumped into the hole without any safety equipment on her body. It seemed that she was possessed by a ghost again. But jumping down without any safety equipment, this was the leap of faith. Chapter 118. Genius remembers love in 1 second divided by little. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. As Miss Servant Girl once said, if the master has to worry about everything, what's the point of a servant's existence? Therefore, after Ms. Zhang's leap of faith, Miss Servant Girl of the club also jumped into it without saying a word or frowning her eyebrows. They dug all the way to the 2nd floor of the underground palace, which was more than 23 meters deep. Even if one was in good health, he would most likely lose his life after falling to the ground from such a height, even if he was lucky enough not to be injured by the surrounding rocks. Knowing this, Snade frowned. Professor Qin, Who on earth is your partner? Professor Chin, who was also stunned by the scene, instinctively looked at Luaccio, expecting to get an answer. It's all right. Luaccio looked at the cave for a while before turning around. Let's go down. Wait. Unexpectedly, Snade shouted with a heavy voice. He frowned. Professor Chin, I feel that there's a problem with your sincerity in wanting to cooperate again. We need to have a good negotiation. Snade, we've been very cooperative. Professor Chin Fong said in a low voice. You didn't resist on the way, right? I promise that I won't touch the things in the underground palace. Snader shook his head. You promised me at the beginning. I don't want to make the same mistake again. Besides, I'm very worried about the person you brought. You can go down, but at least this person can't go down. He must stay here and be guarded by our people. Please cooperate. Saying this, Snade waved his hand, and several strong men with machine guns pointed at Luaccio at the same time. A black man pointed at him. If you don't go down, we'll be in trouble. Luaccio shook his head. I just want to help you fulfill your wish. I don't have any bad intentions, so I hope you won't have any bad intentions towards me. Although Snade was polite at the beginning, this group of people were originally ferocious, and under the influence of powerful force, they had long developed a ruthless style of doing things. Love go little say, the black man with the gun shouted again and pulled the trigger on the automatic rifle in his hand. The bullets swept past Luaccio's feet a few times, like a final warning. The sound of the bullets shooting began to reverberate in the pit, and the atmosphere suddenly became tense. Luaccio looked at the dust in front of him. Boss Luo also had times when he was angry, and this dissatisfaction was like a signal. At the entrance of the underground palace that was illuminated by the strong light, a figure suddenly leaped out. The figure made a beautiful circle in the air, and like a falling meteorite, it landed in front of the black gunman at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, the black gunman's head was separated from his body. In front of him was the woman who was the second to jump down. Her hand was stretched out horizontally, and her 5 fingers were like knives. There was still a trace of bright red on her crystal clear fingernails. Such a lowly and worthless soul. How dare you humiliate my master? There was no scream. The powerful, battle-hardened man, who was called Old Black in the team, quietly fell down like this, and his head was separated from his body. His companions could even see Old Black's extremely wide-open eyes. But how did he do it? Why did he do it with such a delicate woman? And she really just did it. The neat cut on Lao Hei's neck looked like it had been cut by a sharp cutting machine. This horrifying scene aroused the fear in everyone's heart. The other burly men suddenly gritted their teeth at this moment. They didn't care so much, and they had powerful firepower in their hands. Walla, like tongues of fire, the bullets poured out in a flash. But at this moment, the delicate woman's figure drifted like a ghost, and even the high-speed bullets couldn't lock onto her. At such a close distance, what kind of agility and speed was needed to avoid the bullets? Snader couldn't imagine it at all. Love go little say W. Chuno's screams could be heard, because one after another, people fell to the ground without a sound, just like Old Black. Obviously, she wasn't a human being, since she could decapitate a person with her fingernails. Shoot! She's not a human. The leader of the treasure thieves lost his initial calmness all of a sudden. Let's go down. Luaccio didn't choose to continue watching, but turned to look at Professor Chin Fong, waving his hand. The professor's body started to float up, and the box not far away also automatically gathered in front of Luaccio. This kind of deadly conflict couldn't possibly be settled. Boss Luo, who was afraid of trouble, simply cut off all the troubles here. Leading the frightened Professor Chin Fong in the alley, Luaccio slowly descended towards the underground palace. He could still hear the shooting sound of the machine gun and the shouting behind his ears. However, the depth of the underground palace was deeper than he had expected. After feeling the touch of the ground, Professor Chin Fong immediately fished out a strong flashlight and turned on the light source, scanning the surroundings. Zhang Qingrui was standing there charmingly. Her face was a little pale, but there was no fear on her face. Not knowing why, Luocio felt that she was more beautiful than before. Most likely, it was because the soul hidden in her body was like that to begin with, tranquil and natural. Her tranquility was her beauty. At this moment, Zhang Qingrui slightly bowed, saying slowly, "I'm Wenji, greet young master." The sentence hidden in the skeleton was her current self. Luocio nodded. Sure enough, she was Kai Wenji. On the ground, under the strong light, more than a dozen bodies were decapitated. It was a ghastly sight. Nearly half of the people here were dead. It was a total mess. An Asian young man screamed at this time. He reached out his hand and took out a grenade from the hanging bag on his waist. He opened the safety with his mouth and was about to throw it out recklessly. But at this moment, that horrible woman who killed people without leaving any trace turned her head and gazed at him, her sapphire blue eyes emitting a strange light. The Asian youth only felt his body suddenly stiffen. His breathing stopped, and he was in a daze. Before he could throw the grenade in his hand, it had already exploded in his hand. Boom! The strong explosion made Snyder lie down on the ground instinctively. The flames in the center of the explosion scattered in all directions. His subordinate had already been blown up, leaving only his legs intact. The rest of his body parts had long been blown to some unknown place. He looked at the terrifying woman in horror as she moved in the pit. This kind of movement and jumping method was simply like using the post-production CG effects of a movie. At this moment, Snade felt his body was helped up by someone. A dark-skinned man had unknowingly appeared beside him. He was in his 40s or 50s and was bald. There was a red dot between his eyebrows. He was barefoot and his body was wrapped in yellow cloth, revealing his bare arms. Master Mu Jianzuan, my God, I forgot your existence because of the panic. Snade suddenly felt as if he had caught a life-saving straw. Because of the mysterious things that happened in the underground palace, after the matter was reported back to the company, this monk who cultivated in India was hired through special channels. He had seen this miraculous Indian monk before. The scene of him floating naturally was simply astonishing. Mr. Snade, Master Mu Jianzuan frowned at this moment. In the agreement between your company and me, it didn't mention that there would be a foreign species involved. It just asked me to help you explore this underground palace. Foreign species? Mu Jianzuan nodded. Although I don't know what it is, at least it's not human. It doesn't have the smell of human. Snade just wanted to save his life, so he didn't care whether it was a human or not. He quickly said, Mu Jianzuan, no matter what it is, please do it. After that, I'll give a complete report to the company and give you an additional reward. You retreat behind me, Mu Jianzuan said indifferently, expressionless. Snade didn't have time to say anything else, rolling and crawling to hide behind Master Mu Jianzuan. Mu Jianzuan didn't speak at this time, but just took out a Vajra pestle inlaid with colorful gems at both ends and murmured something in front of him. Miss May jumped behind another man who was about to attack with a grenade in his hand. Her body suddenly became stiff, and her waving arms stopped in the air. Seeing this, the man didn't dare to stay in the same place, and ran away in horror. He was indeed an extraordinary person from India, who was hired at a high price and possessed mysterious and ancient power. When Snade saw this, he immediately calmed down. Snader heaved a sigh of relief. However, all of a sudden, the horrifying woman, who had stiffened up, regained her mobility as if nothing had happened. She tilted her head and looked at him with a disdainful smile. Master, Snade looked at Master Mu Jianzuan in horror, only to see the master spitting out a mouthful of blood with his eyes wide open in horror, and the Vajra pestle in his hand directly shattered at this time. I shouldn't be greedy. These were the last words Snade heard from Master Mu Jianzuan. The master had stopped breathing, and he should have stopped breathing at this moment. And this was the last thought in his consciousness. Everything disappeared in this way. Everything was done neatly. Yin yin, yin yin PS1. There should be something similar to the introduction speech, which will be released later. So this chapter is the last one for the public. PS2. These 2 days, the rhythm has been completely disrupted because of the introduction problem. The day before yesterday, Yesterday's compensation has been reached, but today I owe a chapter. I have no choice because I've reached my limit. It's not that I can't write it, but the time doesn't allow it. After all, I've reached this point. So, I'll fold this chapter into 2 chapters and make up for it in addition to next month's update plan. Chapter 119. Genius 1, Second Remember Love, divided by little. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Just like the title, it was just a little seedling at the beginning, but it had finally grown to this day. This young man, woman, in the vast world of books had finally ushered in the first important day of a scholar from a young man, woman, to an adult stage. Because it was the first time, it was very nervous, really nervous, and its body was slightly trembling. Look, aren't her pink toes curled up? Aren't her lips tightly pursed? Her hands are gripping the thick bed sheets that were laid out over the past 2 months. At the moment when it was completely buried in the adult stage, would it make a painful muffled sound but still clench its teeth and endure the necessary coming-of-age ceremony? Or after feeling the joy brought by the coming-of-age ceremony, it tightened its body even more, clenched its still slender fist, and said with tears of joy, "Official, gently. Well, I feel more pressure if I continue to write it." Actually, it's just a soft novel on the shelf, everyone. Next is the normal way to open it. Club has been through 2 months of bumps and bumps. First of all, I would like to thank all the officials who have been with me until now. Please distinguish between this official and the official mentioned above. Thank you. Thank you very much. Next should be the delightful part of crying about being poor and begging for subscriptions. I really want to do this because I'm really poor, but why do I have to do this? I'm miserable, my family environment is not good, but this book doesn't need to be subscribed. Love, Go Little Say Kuit needs to be subscribed just because it has been recognized. Yes, just because it has been recognized. Just like when you go to buy a product, I think most people choose to pay for it because the product itself makes it worth buying, not because of the exaggerated advertising. That's why I can't say things like, Whitestone begs everyone to subscribe, because I know that whether or not you subscribe doesn't depend on whether I'm pleading or not. Rather, it depends on whether the words I write, the story I write, whether it reaches the level that everyone thinks is acceptable. Therefore, I won't talk too much about piracy here. Looking at the problem of piracy, it's like drinking water. Only the person knows whether it's hot or cold. There will also be times when it's hard to say. Of course, because my body is very honest, I will ask for recommendation votes, monthly votes, rewards, and the like as usual. The following is the update plan for the first month. To be honest, I don't believe that there isn't even a single subscriber. So, in order to make more money and maintain the quality as much as possible, I'll be updating 5 times every 2 days in August. Also, I'll start fixing the time. Well, 1 or 2 days after I'm done with this. After all, there would be chaos in a newly opened store, so it could only stabilize later on. Next was the mechanism of the increase. About the increase of subscriptions, I'll use 600 subscriptions as a benchmark. As long as this benchmark is reached, I'll increase the update by 1 for every additional 100 subscriptions. This update mechanism will last until the end of the book. About the reward, I don't know if anyone will reward. Anyway, I'll set it up. If the reward exceeds 20,000 coins, I'll increase the update by 1. Of course, it'll be 5 updates. This will also be effective until the end of the book. About the monthly votes. The monthly votes are metaphysical, and this stingy author doesn't have the capital to use the red packet strategy. So, every 100 monthly votes, I'll increase the update by 1. This update is for August. Well, I seem to have forgotten how many chapters will be updated on the day of the release. My goal is to update 5 chapters on the day of the release. Because it's Sunday to Monday, I'm not sure if the backend will be successfully opened. So, if the first V chapter is not released, you can go to sleep and wait for tomorrow. Finally, welcome to Trafford's Buyers Club. Customer, is there anything you need? Chapter 120. Genius 1, Second Remember Love, divided by little. Say net, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Under the firelight, Yui looked around, taking out a square handkerchief and slowly wiping her palms. Love Go Little Say Chu at this time, a black shadow slid down slowly from outside the pit. Looking carefully, there was actually more than one person. It was Qin Shiyu who slid down from the pit. She was carrying a man in her hand. Qin Shiyu threw the man on the ground casually. "You have a fish that escaped the net." Yi didn't say anything, throwing the used square handkerchief on the ground. A cluster of black flame burned the square handkerchief up instantly. Almost at the same time, the man who was thrown on the ground suddenly twitched painfully. He opened his eyes abruptly, spitting out black flames from his eyes and mouth. But in the blink of an eye, the fish that escaped the net caught by Qin Shiyu had the same fate as the square handkerchief. Qin Shiyu only felt a slight chill on her back. She couldn't help glancing at Yu Yi instinctively, but didn't say anything. It wasn't a fish that escaped the net, but a fish that didn't escape the net at all. It was just an unnecessary thing for her to do. Miss Servant Girl suddenly smiled. "Miss Qin, don't you want to go down?" Qin Shiyu shook her head. "Some things in there are very unfriendly to me. 20 years ago, I planned to go down and explore it, but I stopped in the end." Yi said indifferently, "I've heard about the way of cultivation in the East. The so-called method of longevity is really wonderful, but you seem to care about the Taoist heart very much. There's nothing serious in the underground palace. You seem to have known it?" Qin Shiyu frowned. "Since Miss Qin doesn't want to go down, then I won't accompany you." Yu Yi said indifferently, "Master is still waiting for me." "Wait!" Qin Shiyu suddenly shouted. Yu Yi turned around. Miss Servant Girl looked at her curiously with no dissatisfaction or impatience on her face. Qin Shiyu was silent for a while. "Where did the previous boss go?" Yu Yi suddenly smiled and said, "I'm sorry. Without Master's permission, I won't reveal this. But if Miss Qin really wants to know, then please come to my store again. I will treat you well at that time." Looking at this woman who called herself a maid, Qin Shiyu once again felt the incredible loyalty of this strange woman. "I'll take a look around here." Qin Shiyu shook her head. Yu Yi said with a trace of pity, "Miss Qin, you've thought it through because you have an immeasurable amount of transaction fees on you. I'm sure we'll be able to obtain a lot of things." Qin Shiyu retreated slowly with fear. Looking at Zhang Qingrui, who called herself a concubine, Professor Qin Fong slightly opened his mouth, saying in disbelief, "I found out that this should be the tomb palace of the Xiongnu kings Wuxian in the Three Kingdoms period. That excavated stone coffin is not suitable for ordinary people to be buried in. My name is also Kai Yin." Zhang Qingrui looked at Professor Qin Fong and said indifferently. Professor Qin Fong gave a start, saying in disbelief, "Impossible. It's clearly written in Book of the later Han Dynasty that Kai Wenji had returned and married Dong Si. The poem of grief and indignation, written by Wenji after she returned to the Han Dynasty, was still circulated. If you're her, how could you be in the tomb palace of the person who abducted you?" "The person who returned to the Han Dynasty that year wasn't me," Zhang Qingrui said slowly. "I don't know how it was recorded, but the poem of grief and indignation wasn't written by me." Professor Qin Fong looked at Luoqiu subconsciously, only to find that this student of his had a very interested look on his face. Luoqiu was indeed very interested. How many things recorded in history were true, false, and artistic creations the later generations couldn't judge. Even the most knowledgeable old pedants couldn't compare with the narration of an ancient person. Zhang Qingrui said slowly, "In the past, the Prime Minister sent someone to Xiongnu to exchange for me, but it wasn't me who was exchanged but a servant girl by my side. She followed me to read books since childhood, so her cultivation wasn't bad, and her talent was even better than mine. After returning to the Han Dynasty, the girl felt her miserable life and wrote the poem of grief and indignation. Although she lamented the troubled times, she also wanted to tell me that she had successfully replaced me. If he wasn't in the underground palace, if he hadn't experienced so many unimaginable things, Professor Qin Fong would definitely think this was nonsense. However, this was indeed what Kai Wenji said. What she said, as a person who lived 1,000 years later, he couldn't refute it all. Actually, he didn't need to refute anything. Luoqiu suddenly said, "That day when you possessed Zhang Qingrui and took me to the entrance of the basement of the professor's house. You actually wanted me to find this place and bring you back here? Zhang Chue slightly bowed. Young Master's life spirit is too strong, so it's hard to explain. Young Master is the bright moon, while I'm only the fluorescent light. Plus, my bones are always invaded by the yang qi of the world, so it's already my limit to maintain Miss Zhang's body. What about now? There's enough yin qi to maintain my body in the Tomb Palace. Zhang Qingrui said softly. That's why I met you. Luoqiu thought for a while, frowning. Then why did you still stay in Zhang Qingrui's body? On the one hand, I don't want to be discovered by some things in the Tomb Palace. On the other hand, Zhang Qingrui sighed and said, you don't want to talk to a walking skeleton either. Now, Boss Luo didn't think it was a big deal to talk to a skeleton, but judging from Professor Qin Fang's expression, he obviously didn't want to. Boss Luo, who was originally interested in the things hidden in the depths of the underground palace, now had an additional curiosity to explore Kai Wenji's story. Originally, since she was willing to talk about this, he naturally intended to get rid of her. Luoqiu thought for a while, asking curiously, since it wasn't you who returned to the Han Dynasty, was it left Virtuous Prince's idea, or your own idea, to replace you with the girl beside you? The Wenji in front of him sighed softly. It's my husband's idea, and also my idea. You're willing to stay in the land of the southern Xiongnu to accompany the person who abducted you? Professor Qin Fang didn't know what to say for a while. Professor Qin Fang thought of the scene where the woman in the middle of the Han Dynasty was abducted and fell in love in the land of the Xiongnu. Zhang Qingrui seemed to have thought of Professor Qin Fang's idea, shaking her head slightly. Mr. Qin, don't think too much. My husband isn't left Virtuous Prince, and I didn't remarry anyone in my life. Now, my husband is also buried in this tomb. But for thousands of years, although we're buried in the same tomb, we can't be buried in the same cave. Your husband, or the one who died long ago according to the book. Luoqiu frowned. He had read some books earlier, so now he could throw out some information. I remember his name should be Wei Zhongdao. Yes. Zhang Chun nodded slowly. Everyone knows that my husband died early, but they don't know that he's still alive. All these, we have to start from the time when the evil Zhang Jiao caused chaos. Well, to what extent was the history of that era changed by the devil? Chapter 121. Genius 1. Second, remember love divided by little? Say net, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Since he was the one who wanted to listen to it, Luoqiu decided to listen to it, even if it was changed by the devil. Love, go, little, say, W. Chu in the past, the evil Taoist Zhang Jiao created the Taiping sect and revolted. Soon, he was defeated by the Han Dynasty. Zhang Jiao was defeated and escaped successfully by the golden cicada shedding shell trick. He hid in the Wei family of Hedong. Wei Zhongdao's father was a disciple of the evil Taoist Zhang Jiao. However, his talent was not high and his cultivation was fruitless. Later, he entered the secular world and became a rich man. Wei Zhongdao's father took him in for the sake of their past relationship. Not long after, Wei Zhongdao married Kai Wenji. Later, he was seriously ill and couldn't be cured even if he spent all his wealth. When he was about to die, Zhang Jiao sealed his life and soul with the evil art. It was said that the soul of a dead person was still there, so there might be a way to revive him. Wei Zhongdao's father was overjoyed and begged his former senior brother to cast the spell. Jiao needs to travel far and find the place to cast the spell. In this way, the Wei family started to prepare everything. The news that Wei Zhongdao was seriously ill and couldn't be cured had spread. The Wei family didn't want to expose everything, so they hid it and held a funeral. At the same time, they didn't want others to find the traces of evil art on Wei Zhongdao's body and expose Zhang Jiao. Not long after, everything was well prepared. Coinciding with the chaotic times, they used the excuse that Wenji was kidnapped by the Han cavalry and secretly brought the zombie-like Wei Zhongdao out. They entered the land of the Han tribe. How do you know that it's just a trick of the evil Taoist? Luoqiu and Professor Qin Fang both heard the hatred in this ancient woman's mouth. The evil Taoist had planned everything. He seized the body of the Hun tribe's sage king with the help of evil art and took control of the Hun cavalry. He planned to make a comeback. Luochio frowned and said, "Since the demon lied to you, why did you say that your husband was still alive at that time?" Wenji sighed and said, "In the beginning, it was the evil Taoist who cast a spell to make my husband look like a living dead. He could walk without eating or drinking, and he could even talk. However, my husband's body was decaying day by day. He could only hide in a place of extreme negative energy to delay the decay. Later on, the evil Taoist found a divine stone from beyond the heavens on the grassland. It was actually able to bring spring back to a withered tree. The evil Taoist ordered people to build this underground palace and lay down a strange formation. Using the divine stone as an eye, he buried my husband inside. It will ensure that his body will not rot." Hearing this, Professor Qin Fong raised his head abruptly, asking excitedly, "That godstone really brought your husband back to life?" Wenji shook her head. "At first, I also held this hope. Who knew that everything was just an illusion? Once he left the formation, my husband's body would continue to decay. In order to maintain the negative energy of this tomb palace, I could only come in twice a year." Luochio sighed. "Is this the reason why you don't want to return to the Han dynasty?" Wenji wept in a low voice. "Since I've already married my husband, I'll accompany him for a long time. If I return to the Han dynasty, how can we meet again in this life? Even if I can only see him twice a year, I don't want my husband to be alone in this cold and desolate tomb palace. My husband once persuaded me to go back, but I didn't want to. I knelt in front of the tomb for 3 days and 3 nights. My husband's heart finally softened. I've been sick and weak since I was young, but this place beyond the Great Wall is too harsh. When I was dying, I begged the evil Taoist to bury me in this tomb palace so that I could accompany my husband for a long time." At this moment, Wenji's face was full of resentment, but I didn't expect that the evil Taoist knew that the Godstone had no effect on my husband. He buried my husband just to let my husband's soul nourish that strange Godstone. The evil Taoist buried me in another place in the formation. My soul was in the stone coffin. I wanted to rush out several times, but I couldn't do anything about the light wolf walking in the formation, so I could only be trapped in the stone coffin. Love go little say W. Chu Luochio couldn't help asking, what did he nourish the god stone for? Wenji said, "Later I learned that although the evil Taoist knew that the god stone had no effect on my husband, he only thought that he couldn't understand the mystery of the god stone. The evil Taoist found that the god stone could absorb people's souls. The more souls it absorbed, the stronger its power would be. He was injured in his early years and couldn't recover. After becoming left virtuous prince, he was injured again and didn't have long to live. The evil Taoist didn't want to die, so he buried himself here when he was about to die. You two think there are only 2 floors in the underground palace, but actually there's a 3rd floor below the 2nd floor, where the evil Taoist's tomb is. Countless lives have been lost in the process. The evil Taoist covered the coffin, just waiting for the god stone to absorb enough souls, so that he could break out of the coffin and be reborn one day. The story of the poor woman who was brought out of the coffin had finished. Professor Qin Fong was silent, thinking about something. This poor woman attached herself to Zhang Qingrui and said these. Perhaps she was vaguely blaming Professor Qin Fong and the others for digging into the underground palace for their own selfish desires. Yi jumped down from the entrance silently, landing steadily on the ground. She said softly, "Master, the miscellaneous things outside have been cleaned up." Boss Luo, who naturally believed in Yu Ye's ability, nodded. He didn't intend to think about those treasure-robbing groups who lost their lives. As for listening to this story, he intended to wait for Yu Ye's return. "Take that set of coffin with you," Luochio said directly. "Professor, it's time to find the coffin of your former brothers. Do you have any clue?" Professor Qin shook his head, sighing, "That year we couldn't even touch the 1st floor. After this place collapsed due to the explosives, it's even more difficult. Be careful." Professor Qin Fong's expression changed dramatically. Following his line of sight, they saw a place that was emitting a faint light suddenly appear in front of them. It stood on all 4s on the ground, It was the light wolf that had been mentioned before. Professor Qin Fong, who had seen the horror of this kind of light wolf, took out his pistol subconsciously. However, at this moment, the light wolf suddenly howled, the sound resounding in the underground palace. One after another, light wolves gushed out from all directions. They emerged from the walls and from the ground, baring their fangs. In just a short moment, dozens of light wolves had already gathered. Professor Qin Fong's expression suddenly became ferocious. The appearance of these light wolves brought him back to that night 20 years ago. Along with Professor Qin's extremely agitated mood, the bullet was shot out from the pistol. Bang, bang, bang. The bullet easily penetrated the light wolf's body, but the bullet marks disappeared in a blink of an eye, just like shooting into the water. At this moment, the light wolf that was attacked abruptly kicked off with its hind legs and pounced towards the group. No, don't come here. Professor Qin Fong revealed an unexpected panic. Seeing the light wolf pouncing on them, the professor curled up on the ground, holding his head and trembling all over. Luochio frowned. It seemed that the memory of that year hurt the professor more than usual. However, facing the pouncing light wolf, Luochio didn't move a bit, letting the light wolf pounce on him. That light wolf opened its mouth and bit on Luochio's shoulder. Unexpectedly, Boss Luo just waved his hand, as if patting the dust on his shoulder. Then, the light wolf completely scattered like a torn shadow. There was no trace of blood. There was nothing. It simply turned into fragments of light and disappeared. The disappearance of this light wolf seemed to have enraged all the light wolves. Dozens of light wolves pounced on them at the same time. Just some unreal things disappear. At this moment, Yu walked to the front of Luochio, waving her hand and shooting out a ball of black flame. Under the black tongue of flames, all the light wolves were annihilated just like the first one. That's right. Since the appearance of these light wolves, Luochio felt that these things weren't real at all. The reason why they could exist was probably something like an illusion. This kind of illusion didn't work on him, and it didn't work on Yu either. Snader said that those who went down were killed by random gunfire, probably because they were scared. As for the camera of the drone, it naturally couldn't capture these unreal and uninteresting things. However, the professor was no longer squatting in his original place. Yu pointed at Luochio's side, probably taking advantage of the chaos just now to escape alone. Luochio thought for a while, waving his hand to let the box containing Wenji's bones fly to his back. He wanted to continue moving forward like this. However, thinking about it, he felt like carrying the box on his back. When he was young, he felt that the man carrying the box on his back was very handsome, and that the golden holy garment that saved the world must be hidden inside. But now, he obviously didn't think so. I think it's not difficult for me to get used to it. Luochio turned his head and looked at Zhang Qingrui at this moment. At this moment, the box broke open automatically, and those bones rolled out and scattered on the ground. Yin 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 yin. Chapter 122. Genius 1, Second Remember Love, /go, /little. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. No, don't come here. Don't come here. In extreme panic, Professor Qin Fong quickly shot all the bullets in his hand. However, more and more light wolves besieged him. He leaned against a wall with extreme fear, involuntarily recalling the night 20 years ago. They had been hiding from place to place, but finally, they were chased by these light wolves and had to use explosives. Leaning against the wall, Professor Qin Fong felt the coldness from the underground. He felt that his hands were wet. Cold sweat had already soaked his clothes. All of a sudden, a light wolf pounced on him with a ferocious look. No! The professor closed his eyes tightly, just like that night. However, after a while, he opened his eyes again in astonishment, only to find that the light wolves had disappeared. Only Luochio and a few others were walking towards him with flashlights in their hands. These were the things that Miss Maid found from those people on the pit before she came down. Luochio didn't consider these things at first, but after Yi took out the flashlight, he sighed again that he was taken care of in every possible way. Those light wolves. Professor Qin Fong was still nervous and panicked. Professor, it's all right. Those are just illusions, but it seems that ordinary people like us have no way to deal with them. At this time, a person walked out from behind Luochio, supporting the professor up. This person was obviously Miss Zhang. Professor Qin Fong gave a start, seeing that behind Luochio and his companion, there was a set of white bones standing upright weirdly. This, Zhang Qingrui could only smile bitterly, whispering, "Using the words of another student of yours, I've only heard such words. I'll get used to it." Of course, I was startled at first when I saw a set of white bones walking. After Wenji left Zhang Qingrui's body and returned to her skeleton, those scattered bones began to assemble automatically. Although it was a little scary for Ms. Zhang, it was obviously better than the ancient woman's soul that had been attached to her body all the time. This time was different from the past. Being in this underground palace and under the control of Wenji's soul, Zhang Qingrui's consciousness didn't seem to fall asleep. She also listened to this poor woman's story carefully. Luochio didn't explicitly say that he would send Wenji to her husband's tomb. She didn't dare to beg, so she could only follow them all the way. The light wolves in this underground tomb would not only attack those who trespassed, but they would also attack her. As illusions, the light wolves didn't have real attacks. Once the attack was launched, it would only affect one's mind. If one's mind was strong enough, they might be able to resist these light wolves to a certain extent. Being trapped in the stone coffin for thousands of years, Wenji still couldn't approach her husband's tomb, mainly because of the existence of these light wolves. Though Luochio didn't explicitly say that he would help her to find her husband's tomb, he didn't seem to want her to leave either. Therefore, she followed him silently. Zhang Qingrui didn't know what the so-called deal between Luochio and the professor was. But now she was sure that facing those horrible light wolves, if there wasn't someone who could break them easily between Luochio and Yu Yi, the professor would have a hard time walking in this place. Along the way, many light wolves had been annihilated. But in this complicated underground palace, it was simply impossible to find the professor's companions. Along the way, Professor Qin Fong kept silent. His expression became more and more depressed, as if he had aged 10 years in a flash. It was hard for Ms. Zhang to imagine why the professor had aged so much in such a short time. He was no longer as elegant as when he was teaching. His hair was disheveled, and his eyes lost their brilliance. After walking in this underground palace for a long time, Luochio, who had been looking around calmly, suddenly stopped. "Let's have a rest." Seeing Luochio stop abruptly, Professor Qin Fong thought he had discovered something. However, he was disappointed after hearing Luochio's words. He didn't say anything, sitting down against the wall. If Wenji left Luochio and Yu Yi, it would be difficult for her to walk. Therefore, she could only sit aside silently. Seeing the posture of this Miss Bones, Miss Zhang still didn't dare to look at her. She sat by the side and massaged her sore calves. Zhang Qingrui didn't know what would happen next. Wenji, who was attached to her body at the beginning, had already returned to this tomb palace. Therefore, Zhang Qingrui felt that she had nothing else to do but to let her leave alone, not to mention whether she could leave this prairie. It was a problem for her to climb out or face those light wolves. Zhang Qingrui sighed. Suddenly, she thought of the big pancake she had hidden at the beginning. Feeling hungry, she took it out from her clothes. She thought for a while and split the biscuit into 4 pieces. Miss White Bones probably doesn't need these. Professor, eat something first. If you're too hungry, you can continue walking. She walked to Professor Qin Fong, handing him a pancake. Then, she walked to Luochio and Yu Yi. Miss Servant Girl just smiled. "I don't need it." The servant girl really didn't need to eat, but Ms. Zhang still felt uncomfortable. She thought that the servant girl was disgusted because she took the food out of her clothes, so she felt a little embarrassed. "I heard it's a local delicacy if eaten with milk tea." But Luochio took a pancake, putting it into his mouth and taking a bite. Zhang Qingrui gave a start. She felt that Luochio was the kind of guy who always made people embarrassed, but sometimes he was the destroyer of embarrassment. "You're probably the only one who can think of this question in this place." Zhang Qingrui chuckled, suddenly feeling relaxed. Luochio didn't say anything, only taking another bite. But at this moment, Professor Qin Fong's extremely agitated voice was heard. What did you put in it? Professor Qin Fong threw the pancake on the ground, clutching his throat painfully, vomiting continuously. I just put some mutton inside, nothing else. Zhang Qingrui gave a start. Professor, are you suffering again? I heard that people with brain cancer will vomit frequently. You. At this moment, Professor Qin Fong seemed to have gone mad. He rushed to Qingrui Zhang and reached out his hand to strangle her neck. His eyes and expression were extremely ferocious. You, let me, Professor. Zhang Qingrui grasped the professor's hands painfully, but couldn't free him. Luochio suddenly asked, Professor, is this your determination? Professor Qin Fong, who was on the verge of losing control, suddenly stiffened his body. His expression changed from ferocious to frightened, as if he got an electric shock. He let go of Zhang Qingrui's neck at once, stepping back several steps. Zhang Qingrui coughed several times, holding the wall with difficulty, but dared not to approach him. At this moment, Professor Qin Fong's legs went soft, kneeling down on the ground as if he had lost his soul. What happened to the professor? Zhang Qingrui looked at Luochio blankly, but the one who answered her was Wenji sitting beside her. This Mr. Qin and his companions broke into the underground palace, being chased away by the Light Wolf. They tried to escape, but got separated at last. Mr. Qin and his companions were trapped in the stone room and ran out of food. Finally, he survived by eating his companions' flesh and blood. The explosion of the tomb palace was also what happened when he met his companions after surviving. Eat, people. Looking at Professor Qin Fong lowering his head, Zhang Qingrui felt that he had become a soulless shell. He had only eaten a small piece of mutton, yet he had such a reaction. She recalled that she asked the professor why he was so persistent to come back to this tomb palace. He said he needed to get something back. Zhang Qingrui suddenly understood. What he wanted to get back was his humanity that he had lost. Yin. Chapter 123. Genius remembers love in 1 second divided by little. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. The professor survived in the end. At that time, the group of brothers was ambitious, intending to dig out the treasures from the tomb palace. Who would have thought that he was the only one who survived? Yes, he survived in the end, but he was like a walking corpse. In the past 20 years, he couldn't have a good night's sleep. The life that survived by relying on the flesh and blood of his companions and good brothers was shackled heavily from the beginning. He couldn't eat any piece of meat these years. He once forced himself to bite, but as long as it entered his mouth, his body's instinct was stronger than his will. As long as the taste of meat melted in his mouth, he couldn't help but recall that night 20 years ago. Gao Rui was already by his side. He cut open his flesh because he was too hungry. When one was in despair, one could only be driven by instinct. I will never forget. Professor Qin Fong, who was in a daze, seemed to have aged 10 years again. He looked at his trembling hands. I used them to scoop up Gao Rui's blood and started to drink. I was too hungry. I couldn't help it. I kept telling myself. I looked into Gao Rui's eyes. I knew he didn't die. He looked at me just like that. He couldn't speak, but I knew he must be asking me, scolding me, cursing me, hating me. But I still continued to drink, to bite. I gave up everything I had. I became a beast that even I despised. I'm just a beast that had lost its humanity, a beast that even ate his own brother's flesh and blood. Professor Qin Fong started to cough blood in agitation. Under the abnormal fluctuation of emotions, Professor Qin Fong let out a wail of self-reproach, falling to the ground. Listening to the professor reveal the secret that had been buried in his heart for 20 years in a hoarse voice, the few people in the audience had different feelings. Zhang Qingrui didn't know what Luochio was thinking, and she didn't know what Yu was thinking. This girl now had a natural expression, showing no reaction to the professor's confession. He's also a pitiful person. In the silence, he heard Kai Wenji's soft sigh. At this time, Yi walked to the professor's side to check. She raised her head and said, "He should be too excited," so he fainted. "Do you want to wake him up?" Luocio shook his head. "No need. Let him wake up naturally. He's been hiding these words for 20 years. Now that he has said them, he has naturally exhausted all of them. What Mr. Qin needs is not our tolerance," Kai Wenji said faintly from the side. Luocio frowned and said, "What I'm more curious about is, how do you know about Professor's past? Didn't you say you were trapped in a stone coffin?" Kai Wenji said, "Although I can't leave the stone coffin, the burial chamber is part of the formation of the underground palace. With the help of the formation veins that absorb vital qi from all directions, I can sense a small portion of a nearby area." "Is that so?" Luocio nodded. He stood up and said, "From here, you should remember how to return to your tomb, right? After I find it, I will send you to your husband's tomb." Kai Wenji might have been waiting for this opportunity. At this time, she bowed deeply and said, "Thank you for your kindness, young master." Not long after, under the guidance of Kai Wenji, Luocio easily touched her former tomb. As the professor said before, because of the explosion 20 years ago, this tomb was implicated and was pressed down by the upper layer of the underground palace. But no matter how it collapsed, the position of the vertical falling thing probably wouldn't change much. Luocio asked at this time, "In which direction?" Kai Wenji stretched out her hand and pointed with her finger bone. "In this direction, it was above the 4 tomb chambers." Luocio nodded. He walked to the front of the wall, reached out and touched it, and activated his ability similar to Mind's Eye. His sight was jumping around the thick soil filled each tomb chamber. Suddenly, Luocio frowned. He withdrew his hand and turned back. "I'm afraid it's not this layer that fell, but the 3rd layer below. The 2nd layer was also destroyed by the collapse." Then we can't find Gao Rui's body?" Zhang Qingrui couldn't help but feel disappointed. "Not necessarily," Yi said lightly. She walked to the center of the tomb chamber and slowly squatted down. She stretched out her hand and pressed on the stone slab. "Master, please pay attention." After saying that, Yuye's arm exerted a little force and directly pressed on the floor. It seemed that nothing had happened, and it was just a gentle press. But in the blink of an eye, a slight cracking sound was heard. At this moment, with the servant girl as the center point, the entire stone chamber's floor cracked at a terrifying speed. Before Zhang Qingrui could react, she felt as if her body had suddenly lost gravity and fell down along with the cracked rock. But at this time, she felt something dragging her body. Rumble! The stone chamber started to fall. Not long after, everyone fell into a cyan world. There was no complicated maze like in the 1st or 2nd layer. There were only a large number of pillars supporting the entire 3rd layer. Here, they could see corpses all over the ground. They fell on the ground in various postures. White bones were piled up like a sea of bones. Countless white bones, some of which were already broken. There was a cyan light source in the depth of those pillars. It was this inverted light source that illuminated the entire 3rd layer of the underground palace. Luocio looked up and estimated the position. He then started a search. This place was unusually gloomy and cold, like a ghost town. Zhang Qingrui's body started to tremble. She didn't dare to move her feet. At this time, Professor Qin Fong coughed several times and slowly woke up, perhaps because of the loud noise caused by the falling stone. Qin Fong looked around blankly, but his eyes suddenly froze. He coughed several times, and his weak body started to crawl on the ground. He swept away those white bones in front of him and crawled out a clean path. Finally, he stopped crawling and stopped in front of a corpse. It was unknown whether it was because of the extreme cold here, the corpse that was supposed to be dead became stiff instead and didn't decay much. That corpse should have hit a pillar when it fell from above. Now, it was in a sitting posture with its head lowered. However, Luocio and others who followed him could clearly see the bones of the corpse's arms, neck, and even the places where the clothes were torn. Those were the traces of being bitten. Qin Fong didn't speak. His hands were trembling, as if he had exhausted all his strength. He slowly and timidly straightened the corpse. Gao, Rui. Old Qin, I finally found you. I came to see you. Qin Fong's trembling hands touched his former brother's face, holding it up slowly. He said in a daze, I know you're also waiting for me. For the past 20 years, I always knew that I could hear it every night. That ate your flesh and drank your blood. You didn't say anything, but I could hear that you must have cursed me bitterly in your heart time and time again. I knew it all. Qin Fong started to tidy up Gao Rui's clothes, his voice already hoarse. That day I heard voices and found that Nyozi and the others didn't die. They were just nearby. I didn't dare to bring you out. I wiped off the blood on my lips. I rolled on the ground, letting the soil cover the traces on my body. At that time, fear and self-reproach had already erased my conscience. I didn't know how to face Nyozi and the others, let alone how to face your wife. Qin Fong suddenly gave a sad smile. When I left, I didn't dare to look at you. When I look at you, it's like looking at myself, looking at the version of myself that I threw myself onto you. He heaved a long sigh. These years, I've been asking myself, why do we dig the ground and dig the grave? We comforted ourselves with various excuses, but in fact, we were just deceiving ourselves. In fact, we only did it for money. Why do we want money? Of course, it was for living. We coveted everything, and that's how we ended up now. I'm the only one who survived. But I asked myself, am I still alive? Professor Qin Fong started to tidy up Gao Rui's messy hair. Don't worry, I've raised your child Chuyu. She's fine, don't worry. Before the new year, I've written my will. When I die, I'll give everything to her. I've also buried your wife in the garden behind your house in your hometown. I've set up a crown grave for you beside her. I thought that one day I'll bring you out and bury you beside your wife. Qin Fong suddenly became silent. After a while, he said, but now I know that I don't dare to bring you back. How can I bring you back like this? What face do I have to bring your broken body back? All of a sudden, Qin Fong pulled out a bright dagger from his boot, saying softly, so at least I have to make up for the missing part of your body before I can take it back. Gao Rui, I'll give you back what I ate, okay? He used the dagger in his hand to cut off his other arm, cutting his flesh to the bone, and then pulled it forcefully. Qin Fong screamed miserably, pulling out a piece of bright red flesh from his arm. This is the first bite. But he didn't stop. Instead, he raised the dagger in his hand, cutting off his arm again. One cut and another cut. The third cut. Seeing Professor Qin Fong's self-mutilation, Zhang Qingrui wanted to step forward, but her arm was pulled by Luoqiu immediately. This is too cruel. Professor, you don't have to. Luoqiu shook his head, saying, he's starting to find what he lost. Do you want to stop him? Zhang Qingrui lowered her head, turning around. She couldn't bear to see this. Hearing Professor Qin Fong's continuous screams, her scalp was numb. She couldn't bear it anymore. Can't we do something? Luoqiu blinked his eyes. He suddenly felt something was hidden in Gao Rui's body. Like a flame, it suddenly jumped up. The soul in the body hadn't completely dispersed. Was it just sleeping? Maybe it was caused by the special environment of the third floor of the underground palace. Luoqiu looked at Professor Qin Fong subconsciously. When he cut the 10th cut, his arm had already been separated from the bone and flesh, becoming extremely horrible. Finally, after the 11th cut, Qin Fong intended to cut his thigh. Luoqiu moved. He walked quickly to Qin Fong, reaching out to grab his arm that was holding the dagger. Don't stop me. Professor, you're ashamed of the first cut. So are the second one. All the time. Luoqiu's expression didn't change. After cutting off this arm, do you feel it's not enough? Or do you think you can get the pleasure of redemption by continuing to hurt yourself? I thought you'd stop by yourself. What did you say? Luoqiu sighed. Professor, do you know you're laughing? Qin Fong's body stiffened. His fingers that were holding the dagger loosened in a flash. The dagger fell to the ground with a clang. I'm just... Luoqiu looked at Professor Qin Fong's left arm that was separated from a bone and flesh. He silently tore his own clothes into strips of cloth, wrapping Professor Qin Fong's arm and shoulder tightly. I'm actually not in a position to stop you. But I'm curious. Professor, you said that your brother just watched silently that year, right? Qin Fong gave a start. Luochio stood up, suddenly pointing at the forehead of Gao Rui's corpse. He's still here. Maybe he can tell you the answer. In front of him, the cold and withered corpse started to gush out some white fog. That white fog slowly rotated, like a white paint spreading in the water, and then gradually formed a man's face that was almost the same as that of the corpse. Gao Rui. Liberated from a corpse, it was the person who should have died 20 years ago. Gao Rui. It's really you. Qin Fong opened his eyes wide, looking at the soul in front of him with excitement. You're still here. Gao Rui's soul just shook his head slightly, using the tone that only existed in Qin Fong's memory. Old Qin, do you know you're so old now? I can't chew your flesh? Qin Fong knelt on the ground again, his shoulders twitching, his expression sorrowful, tears running down his cheeks, his voice hoarse. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Chiyu, my child, you're pretty now, aren't you? Thank you for taking care of me these years. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I've also made you worry about my wife and deal with her funeral. As her husband, I can't do anything about it. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Old Qin, you just said in the past 20 years, you've been asking, why do we do those immoral things? I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Actually, I'm also thinking, but I can't think of an answer. Maybe it's just like what you said. It's just for money, for greed. However, have you forgotten that no matter how greedy we are, every time we succeed in conquering an ancient tomb, the excitement, the joy, the unparalleled satisfaction, and the joy of sharing with our brothers? I'm sorry, I couldn't walk at that time. My legs were already broken. Didn't you carry me to the end? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I can't walk. I really can't walk. But what about my wife, my child? I have to go out alive, but I can't. I know you're hungry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Do you know why I didn't say a word when I watched you eat me? I'm sorry. Because if you can go out alive, I know you won't mistreat my wife and my child. Old Qin, these years you've suffered a lot. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Gao Rui's soul stretched out his hand, gently putting it on Qin Fong's back. Hey, buddy, I said you're crying like a woman, an old and ugly woman. Qin Fong buried his head deep on Gao Rui's shoulder and kept saying sorry, saying that he couldn't say those years when his mouth was full of blood and flesh, and he was sorry in his heart. What the professor lacked was not the cut of flesh and blood, but the words of apologies. Chapter 124. Genius 1. Second, remember love, divided by little. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Professor, is he? Professor Qin Fong didn't speak anymore. He just leaned on Gao Rui's shoulder and stopped moving. Love, go little say. Chu Luochio didn't answer Zhang Qingrui's question. He walked to the professor's side again. He couldn't tell whether Professor Qin Fong was guilty or not in the past 20 years. Humans had no way to define whether something was guilty or not. He reached out his hand and gently wiped the professor's eyes. The pair of old eyes finally closed. Looking at her tutor, Zhang Qingrui felt sad for this old man, even though they had only spent time together in the classroom every now and then. She looked at Luochio, asking softly with a trace of uncertainty, did the professor get back what he lost? Luochio's eyes turned soft. He grabbed Professor Qin Fong's remaining hand, putting it on Gao Rui's palm and putting it on top of each other. Thinking of those decades ago, when they raided tombs together, went through fire and water together, and went through so many hardships together, would they also be like this, cheering hand on hand? How could he lose that kind of thing? Luochio raised his head, looking at his classmate. Since he lost it, he didn't need to come back. I think he just got lost. Zhang Qingrui finally shed a tear. Love, go little say, ordinary people would die after cutting their wrists due to excessive blood loss, not to mention the professor's arm, which was cut off by himself. When the professor stopped moving and didn't say sorry, she already knew it in her heart. From the beginning to the end, it was the professor who couldn't forgive himself. The mistake was like a demon in his heart, unable to extricate himself. The professor's life was coming to an end. But now it was enough for him to get rid of the demon in his heart before he died. She also walked to the front of Professor Qin Fong, reaching out her palm and covering it with hers. Professor, don't get lost in your next life. She looked at the peaceful smile on the professor's face and smiled through her tears. She felt that the trip to the grassland, although dangerous, had strengthened her heart. Although Boss Luo had a mild temperament, he believed that he was a person who valued his promises. It didn't matter if it was the business of the club or something else. Gao Rui's awakened soul had yet to disperse, perhaps because of the uniqueness of this underground palace. Luoqiu looked at Gao Rui, and after a moment of silence, he said, "The professor and I have an agreement. It includes the content of bringing your body out. How do you wish to return home?" To Gao Rui, going home seemed like an incomparable luxury. The gradually fading soul looked at Qin Fong, who was no longer breathing, and felt that he was sleeping peacefully. "If possible, bury me in my hometown. Old Qin should be buried next to me." Gao Rui looked at him like an older brother and said softly, "This guy didn't have any family in the past. I brought him into the trade, so my home is his home." "Okay." Luoqiu nodded. It didn't matter if it was the business of the club. He just took it as a man's promise. Gao Rui said gratefully, "Thank you." However, before he could finish his sentence, the remnant soul in his body seemed to be pulled by something and began to twist and stretch. Not only him, but also Professor Qin Fong's body started to emit some white mist. Their souls seemed to be attracted by something, and they were all moving in the same direction. Luoqiu frowned, reaching out his hand. Professor Qin Fong's soul gathered in his palm, turning into a ball of white light with an imperceptible pink color. As for Gao Rui's soul, it didn't come back. The professor's soul was written in the contract as the transaction fee and was protected by the club's treaty. Of course, no one could snatch it from the contract. At this moment, Kai Wenji's walking skeleton scattered all of a sudden. Leaving the skeleton, this ancient lady also appeared in the form of a soul. Compared to Gao Rui's soul, her soul was obviously resisting the attraction from the depths of the three-story underground palace. "Is it the power of the immortal stone you mentioned, or the effect of the formation hidden in the underground palace?" Luoqiu took back the professor's soul, looking at her and asking, "I don't know. It's the first time for me to enter this place." Kai Wenji shook her head. "I know about the three-story underground palace, but every time I want to approach it, I feel like I'm in a tornado, so I don't dare to approach it." "Luoqiu, I feel dizzy." Ms. Zhang held her forehead. Her body was a little soft, and she couldn't stand on the ground. In a blink of an eye, she also fell down. Luoqiu and Yi, who didn't feel anything strange about this, exchanged a look. Luoqiu said, "Let's go to the front and have a look." Yi nodded, waving her hand in front of her. Then a gray, translucent, strange light cover spread out, including Zhang Qingrui and Kai Wenji's soul. At this moment, Zhang Qingrui seemed to feel better. At least she could stand up. Luoqiu started to walk in the direction of Gao Rui's soul. He walked in the front, and the white bones on the road automatically scattered to both sides as he walked. This scene made Ms. Zhang, who was following behind him, speechless. These white bones were like the desperate ancient people who had to kneel down on both sides of the road when they saw the noblest person. Luoqiu didn't know what the two behind him were thinking. He only saw that the speed of Gao Rui's soul being pulled seemed to be gradually accelerating, and the cyan light ahead became more and more intense. Except for Gao Rui's soul, they didn't see anything similar on the road. It's strange. Gao Rui's body should have fallen down at the beginning. Why didn't his soul be attracted until now? Yi said beside Luoqiu, "Master, did you notice that Gao Rui had something like an amulet on his body?" Luoqiu recalled for a while and vaguely remembered that there was something made of yellow talisman hanging on the chest of Gao Rui's body. Then he nodded. The servant girl, who was used to using modern words to let her new master understand things at the fastest speed, said in a low voice, "That thing still has some residual waves, which probably means protection. These tomb robbers often deal with cemeteries, so they bring those things for psychological comfort. Gao Rui himself may not know that it has the power of protection. Maybe he got it from somewhere. Maybe it's from a Taoist temple. If it wasn't from a Taoist temple, it was probably sold by a witch or a trickster. Master, here we are. Behind a huge stone pillar in front of them was the source of the cyan light. Looking from both sides of the stone pillar, they could clearly see a stone platform. On the stone platform, there was a huge stone hall, and the stone pillar in front of them seemed to have separated it from a middle. Luocio's curiosity rose to the highest point after entering the tomb palace. He bypassed the stone pillar and walked forward. Yin 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 yin. Chapter 125. Genius 1, Second Remember Love, Go/Little. I will provide you with wonderful novels to read. If the one buried in the stone coffin was indeed the famous founder of the Way of Peace, the leader of the Yellow Turban Army, then he was probably the most important person Luocio had ever seen. His peaceful daily life had long been involved in the grotesque and variegated world. Now that he was able to see this famous historical figure, then he would more or less have similar opportunities in the future. Luocio had such a premonition. Then he would properly size up this person who had once caused the world to be in turmoil. It should be because the image of the evil Taoist Zhang Jiao in Kai Wenji's memory had an inestimable fear. Luocio's gaze swept past Kai Wenji's soul form. She was indeed an ancient beauty, but her current expression was not very good. At this time, Gao Rui's soul had already been absorbed into the stone coffin, and there had been no movement for some time. Luocio stretched out his hand to touch the coffin lid. However, just as he was about to touch the coffin lid, a dazzling azure light suddenly shot out from the gap between the coffin and the coffin lid. The intense green light instantly illuminated everything in the vicinity. An extremely strong force seemed to have erupted from the coffin, fiercely pushing the heavy coffin lid. At the same time, the azure light seemed to have reached its limit. In the midst of this intense azure light, a figure slowly stood up from the coffin. Gradually, it became clear that it was a withered face, wearing a red silk robe with black beast skin stuck to the sleeves. The head wore a conical pointed hat, and both hands were placed in front of the chest in a clenched position. Between the two hands, there was a strange object. It was neither gold, nor stone, nor jade, and the source of the azure light that illuminated the 3 floors of the tomb palace was this strange object in front of them. Divine stone, Zhang Jiao. As early as when the coffin lid was broken, Luocio calmly retreated. At this time, he looked at the scene in front of him and looked at Kai Wenji. Kai Wenji clenched her teeth and nodded heavily. Luocio looked up and down at this person wearing a robe, and, for the time being, there was no way to define whether this thing could be considered a person or not. Boss Luo could now clearly distinguish the difference between a normal person and a non-normal person. Who dares to disturb this king's sleep? Suddenly, the person in the coffin slowly opened his eyes. It was a pair of gray and muddy eyes. Luocio could not see any intelligence that a human should have in this pair of eyes. Wenji, but once he opened his eyes, he would naturally see everything. The person in the coffin, or should he call him Zhang Jiao now? A solemn and slightly angry voice rang out. You dare to bring people into this king's tomb. This concubine, Kai Wenji's SS bodies is his body. Inside the coffin, Zhang Jiao snorted coldly. Fine, I don't have enough living souls for my resurrection. All of you can become my helpers. Wait a moment. Seeing that the strange Godstone in Zhang Jiao's hand suddenly shrunk, Yi suddenly said, Before that, can you tell me what you're holding in your hand? My master wants to know. Can you tell us? Boss Luo was stupefied. He really wanted to ask about it. He felt that if this continued, he would completely degenerate into a useless person who did not even need to open his mouth. This is a divine item from heaven. It's fine if you ordinary people don't know it. Quickly offer it to this king. Zhang Jiao probably hadn't finished speaking yet, and he probably didn't have the chance to finish speaking now, because this ancient demon in the coffin, the vicious person who had stirred up chaos in the world, obviously didn't have time to react at this time, and flew out of the stone coffin. Back to the scene before Zhang Jiao flew out. The club's servant girl frowned slightly and appeared in front of Zhang Jiao at a speed beyond the limit of vision. She reached out and pressed on Zhang Jiao's chest. Like a truck after a collision, Zhang Jiao's eyes widened as he flew backwards, but his body eventually came to a halt in midair. His crimson clothes fluttered and he was full of anger. Unexpectedly, before he could find the woman who suddenly attacked him, he felt a huge force hit him from behind, and his whole body hit the ground. The huge impact caused the back of the stone slab that was stuck here to instantly shatter. A thing like you, who is neither alive nor dead, dares to say offer in front of my master? Worm, do you know what is the real nobleness? It was a very, very soft voice. Love, go little say, W. Chu, the voice was so soft that it seemed to be heard by the ear. Only Zhang Jiao could hear it, and he was attacked again for the third time. She stepped on him fiercely again. The huge force passed through Zhang Jiao's body to the floor. The cracked stone slab was now broken, and Zhang Jiao's body sank into the ground. Bitch, how dare you? If I had recovered, how could I let you? The servant girl stepped on Zhang Jiao's body again and said indifferently, there is no if. No matter how strong you were before, you are weak now. Seeing this powerful woman stepping on him again, Zhang Jiao's voice was a little flustered. Wait. About the God Stone, I will tell you the truth. Yi slapped Zhang Jiao and pushed him quite far away. From Luochio's position, he probably needed to look into the distance. Hearing the voice from the front, Zhang Qingrui said subconsciously, You don't want to help? Boss Luo had thought about it in his spare time. Since the club had harvested a wave of non-humans before he took over, it seemed that there would be times of struggle in the future. Then, if he used the word wizard to describe himself, he should be the kind of wizard who didn't have the heart for close combat. Even so, there would be times when his male hormones would be aroused occasionally. However, the servant girl beside him looked as if she couldn't wait to arrange everything for him properly and eliminate all problems from beginning to end. I don't think so, Luochio said in an uncertain tone. Just when he finished, Yu Ye's voice came from the front. Master, you can come here now. Zhang Jiao, who used to call the wind and summon the rain, was now sitting on the ground awkwardly. Seeing the arrival of Luochio, Zhang Jiao slowly opened his mouth. This thing is a gift from heaven. When I found it, there were strange flowers growing around it, and the grass and trees were providing shade. It was very magical that flowers and trees could be reborn. I searched all the ancient books, but couldn't find out what it was, so I called it with the Godstone. Zhang Jiao looked up at the Godstone in his hand. After that, I studied it all day long and found that it could not only make withered trees come back to life, but also absorb the souls of living people. The more souls it absorbed, the greater the ability to revive withered trees. Zhang Jiao sighed. Back then, I used the art of changing fate to seize the body of the Xiongnu Sage King. But this was a heaven-defying act. I knew I didn't have long to live, so I searched for a way to save him. I've never seen anything as magical as this in my life. I refined this item with the method of cultivating magic tools. Heaven didn't let me down, and I gradually succeeded. I cultivated the underground palace and set up a soul imprisonment array. Tens of thousands of young boys and girls were trapped here. When my life was about to end, I was buried here. But I didn't expect that after 1,000 years, after this item absorbed a large amount of souls, not only was it unable to restore me, but its magical power was also gradually dissipating. But this item's absorption of souls became stronger and stronger, and now it's almost beyond my control. Even I'm living in fear now, resisting this item's invasion all day long. If I don't have a supply of fresh souls, it will continue to erode me. Zhang Jiao stretched out the Godstone in his hand. If the two of you want this item, just take it. This item has begun to erode my spirit. If you don't take it, I can only vanish, Luochio said. I know a cultivator who is also pursuing the path of immortality. At first, I thought her methods were somewhat dishonorable. But now, it seems that compared to you, she's just a small child. Zhang Jiao didn't refute him since he was weaker. Luochio looked at Kai Wenji. His eyes were full of hope from the beginning. So he asked, "Where is Wei Zhongdao buried?" Zhang Jiao looked at Luoqiu in surprise. He didn't expect him to ask such a question. He looked at Kai Wenji, thinking about their relationship, and didn't speak for a long time. However, Miss Maid was not happy. She sneered beside Zhang Jiao. Zhang Jiao's expression changed, and he stammered, "Zhongdao, Zhongdao, my husband, how's my husband?" Kai Wenji waited for 1,000 years, but she couldn't see her husband again. Now that she had the chance, she was anxious. For 1,000 years, my husband has been alone. Is he? Zhang Jiao felt the great pressure from Yi. He lowered his head and said, "Zhongdao won't be alone, and he doesn't have to be." "What are you talking about?" "Your husband died long ago." Zhang Jiao's voice was even softer. "I wanted to borrow the Wei family's wealth, so I used a spell to make you think that Zhongdao's life spirit is still in his body." Kai Wenji clenched her teeth. "I don't believe it." "Then, in the Tomb Palace, I can see him twice a year." Zhang Jiao said, "It's just a trick. Talking to you behind your back is just me." Like a thunderbolt from Qing Tian, Kai Wenji took 2 steps back in a panic. She shook her head. If it was true, why did she persist 1,000 years ago? And why did she wait for him for 1,000 years? No. Kai Wenji held her head, and some of her eyes suddenly became extremely ferocious. In the soul state, her long hair spread out, and there was no trace of her ancient charm. In an instant, she looked like a ferocious female ghost. "You lied to me." In the blink of an eye, Kai Wenji turned into a cloud of gray fog and rushed toward Zhang Jiao. Just when Luoqiu thought she was going to vent her anger on Zhang Jiao, the fog suddenly turned and swept away the Godstone from Zhang Jiao's hand at an extremely fast speed. "My husband, I'm coming for you." "These people are lying to me." A faint voice could be heard, and Kai Wenji had already gone to the other side of the Tomb Palace. Almost at this moment, the ground of the entire 3-story underground palace began to shake. Zhang Jiao said in a panic, "The underground palace was built together with the ley lines, and the Godstone was refined into the eye of the array by me. It will never leave this place." Luoqiu frowned and said, "Speak clearly." "The spiritual energy accumulated in the ley lines for 1,000 years will erupt. The underground palace will be completely destroyed." Yin. Chapter 126. A genius remembers love in 1 second/small. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Although it was said that they couldn't leave this place, the tremors suddenly became incomparably violent. The upper layer that was supported by the large number of stone pillars now began to crumble. Zhang Jiao suddenly began to scream miserably. His withered body began to melt as if it had been splashed with strong acid, and the melting speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, the withered corpse had turned into a pile of bones. In the end, only a cloud of gray mist was left from the bones, as if it would dissipate at any moment. "Looks like he didn't hold on for too long." Yui glanced at him and said, "Although that Godstone is constantly trying to devour his soul, he can't actually leave the Godstone. It's just that he doesn't know it." Luoqiu nodded. Feeling the strong vibration and the cracking of the ground, he quickly said, "Bring the professor and Gao Rui's bodies first." Yui nodded and quickly went to the place the professor had left behind. Luoqiu glanced at eldest Miss Zhang, who had been frightened countless times today. He waved his hand and let her body float up. "I'll take you out. Don't be afraid." "Yes." After saying that, Luoqiu also walked in the same direction. When he passed by the huge sarcophagus, he stopped and looked into it. Then, he quickly reached out and seemed to grab something from the sarcophagus. Zhang Qinrui didn't see it clearly, so she didn't dare to ask. Luoqiu then sped up and met up with Yi. At this time, Yi had already grabbed the professor and Gao Rui's body with one hand and was ready to evacuate at any time. Luoqiu glanced back at the depths of the 3-story underground palace. Then, he waved his hand and gathered up Kai Wenji's skeleton. Even though the entire underground palace was shaking, it couldn't stop Kai Wenji's determination to find Wei Zhong's room. The Godstone, which was the eye of the formation, had left. Those light wolves born from this formation naturally didn't appear anymore. Without the obstruction of the light wolves, it wasn't difficult for her to reach Wei Zhong's room. Love go little say W. True, there was no light in the cold room, but the godstone itself gave off a faint green light. Kai Wenji stopped in front of a small sarcophagus. She returned from her fog-like state to her humanoid soul form. She regained her ancient beauty and was no longer a frightening female ghost. How could she meet her husband with that hideous face with disheveled hair? Kai Wenji lowered her head and wept as she stared blankly at the stone coffin that had been sealed for thousands of years. Zhang Jiao's words, whether true or not. At this moment, she had arrived. Husband, can you let Wenji see you? Kai Wenji's godstone. Godstone's God's room god. The cold green light didn't change much. The most it changed was that it was pulling Kai Wenji from the beginning to the end. The godstone was like a flame to her. It was like ice hitting magma, weakening her soul all the time. She was like a moth to a flame. She would rather believe the lies from 1,000 years ago, regardless of the fact that the godstone could make her disappear. My husband, you still don't want to see me? Kai Wenji lay on the sarcophagus, weeping. She was like 1,000 years ago, kneeling outside the tomb palace for 3 days and 3 nights in order not to return to the land of Han. What's the use of having you? With grief, anger, despair, and everything she had been waiting for 1,000 years, Kai Wenji waved her hand and swept the god stone on the sarcophagus to the ground. It rolled, paused, and was picked up. The rolling god stone finally hit something. It hit Luochio's feet. He picked up the god stone and handed it to Yu Yi. Then he pointed his finger, and the bones that had been floating behind him slowly floated to the front of the sarcophagus. Kai Wenji heard the movement and raised her head with tears in her eyes. Luochio didn't say anything. He just moved the lid of the sarcophagus and put the bones into the sarcophagus. You can be together now. Love go little say W. Luochio felt that he wasn't good at speaking in this kind of situation, so he said simply, from another point of view, since they were separated by life and death 1,000 years ago, at least they could be buried together after death 1,000 years later. After doing this, Luochio looked at the motionless Kai Wenji and chose to turn around and leave. The underground palace was shaking violently. He wasn't afraid of being buried alive, but it would be troublesome to get out the bodies of the professor and Gao Rue and Zhang Qingrue. Thank you, child Luo. This was the last voice of the ancient woman that boss Luo heard. She might have walked into the sarcophagus and fallen asleep quietly. Rumble. On the surface, in the huge pit, there seemed to be a huge circle of quicksand. It started to sink crazily from the center. The heavy equipment used for the excavation, the bodies of the treasure thieves, the countless bones on the first, second, third, and third floors of the underground palace, Kai Wenji, Wei Zhongdao, Zhang Jiao, and even the professor's past were all buried. It was sunrise now, and the grassland showed infinite scenery. The wind started to blow and began to sweep away the dust in the pit. Luochio stood at the edge of the pit, quietly looking at the rising sun. It turned out that they had already spent the night. Will they be disturbed again in the future? He didn't know when Ms. Zhang also came over. She was about 3 steps away from Luochio, and she was also looking at the sinking pit. Luochio knew who she was referring to. Who knows? If they want to dig, they can still dig. Zhang Qingrue smiled bitterly. People die for wealth, and birds die for food. Those treasure thieves, even if they weren't, Zhang Qingrue glanced back at the girl who was cleaning up the wrangler and the bodies of the professor and Gao Rue. Even if they can enter the underground palace, I'm afraid they will die in vain. Luochio smiled and didn't say anything. Zhang Qingrue suddenly gritted her teeth. Luochio, I have something to discuss with you. Can you not erase my memory? You and that lady. I know you can do it. Why? Zhang Qingrue took a deep breath, inhaling the fresh air of the grassland. She stroked her hair under the strong wind. Looking at Luochio, I don't want to forget the professor's story, what happened in the underground palace, and those treasure thieves these days. She looked at the sinking pit. My life is peaceful. I'm not afraid you will laugh at me. These days, for me, are more nervous and exciting. I've never felt this way before, although these past few days were dangerous, to the point where I could lose my life, but for the first time, I felt my heart beating so fast. For the first time, I breathed in the air that was different from the past. For the first time, I felt that being alive was so wonderful. I was afraid that I wouldn't remember. If I forgot, I would never feel this way again. Taking a deep breath, Zhang Qingrui closed her eyes and welcomed the rising sun. She smiled and said, "Maybe I won't encounter something like this in the future. I just hope that there will be something worth remembering in the future." She suddenly opened her hands. At the edge of the pit, the strong wind blew, as if she would fly away in the next moment. After a long time, Zhang Qingrui sighed, looking at Luochio. "It seems like I need to give you something to do. What should I give you? I'll make some changes. I'll erase myself and Yu Ye's memories. Okay?" Luochio suddenly said, "If you remember us, I'll feel awkward. That's better. After all, if I remember your things, I won't dare to be friends with you anymore." Zhang Qingrui nodded in agreement. This was exactly what she wanted. So she asked with expectation, "Is the price high?" "You've already given me one." Luochio smiled. Zhang Qingrui was stunned, showing a puzzled expression. Luochio said indifferently, "Take it as a reward for treating me in the underground palace. It's just a small piece of cake." Zhang Qingrui opened her mouth. "It may not be important for you, but it's not important for me either." Luochio imitated Zhang Qingrui, opening his hands at the edge, feeling that the wind could lift his body at any time. "The important thing is that you've separated." What should I do next?" Luochio walked to the Wrangler, taking out a travel bag and taking out some things wrapped in newspaper. "First, make a call home." The professor probably didn't want to leave from the beginning, Luochio said indifferently. "So take your ID card and wallet with you." Zhang Qingrui took the things, turned on the phone, but turned it off immediately. "Can I send the professor off for the last time? I think he won't be so lonely if there's one more person to send him off." Luochio nodded. 1 or 2 days of memory alteration was not a big deal. "Last question." Zhang Qingrui blinked her eyes. "Since that magical stone can absorb people's souls, why only Kai Wenji's soul is fine after so many years?" This was found in Zhang Jiao's sarcophagus. Luochio took something out of his pocket and spread it in front of Zhang Qingrui. It was a comb. Zhang Qingrui was stunned, seeming to understand something, but she was not sure. Luochio said, "It should be a woman's comb." Yin 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 yin. Chapter 127. Genius remembers love in 1 second /small. Shua Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. "Grandma, help me." Suddenly, Zhang Lilinfang woke up from her dream with cold sweat all over her body. Her heart was beating fast, and she breathed hard. She was frightened by the scene in the nightmare. It had been the 5th day, but Zhang Qingrui hadn't been found. She almost lost her composure. Zhang Lilinfang put on her pajamas and pushed open the door. "Prepare the car, prepare the car." The chauffeur, who woke up in a panic, hurriedly prepared the car and drove to Guyu Zhai under the order of old madam. It was still dark. After returning to the shop, Zhang Lilinfang opened the door and walked towards the storeroom of the antique shop. "Wait for me here." The driver nodded and had to wait in the lobby. In front of the storeroom, Zhang Lilinfang hesitated for a moment. Finally, she took a deep breath and opened the security system. She had no choice. Her only granddaughter was her lifeblood. She couldn't wait any longer without any news. She seemed to be able to hear her granddaughter's screams, "One more day or one more hour." An old lady was so obsessed with her only family member that she was almost crazy. Even though she had a grudge, Zhang Lilinfang still came here personally, in front of the locked black card in the storage room. She took out the black card from the cabinet with trembling hands. "No matter what you want me to do, I only want my to come back safely." The old madam held the black card tightly with both hands. But not long after, the old madam's expression changed dramatically. She suddenly exerted force with both hands and tore the black card apart. Looking at the black card that was easily torn apart by her, Lilanfang's face suddenly showed a sharp and unusual coldness. Zhong family, old bastard. I lent you the black card to extend your life because of this sisterly relationship. You dare to lie to me. How dare you cheat me with a fake one? She had hidden the black card for dozens of years. It couldn't be destroyed by fire or cut by a knife. But the one in her hand was obviously fake. The old lady sat on the chair in the storeroom quietly. She lowered her head and didn't turn on the light. By the time Sir Shiji hurried over, it was already dawn. This was the first time he had seen such a frightening expression on the old madam's face in the past few decades. Sir Shiji looked around and found that many things in the storage room were broken on the ground. Sir Shiji hurried forward and asked worriedly, "Madam, what happened? Old bastard Zhong lied to me." "Shiji, you come with me to find him." Zhang Lilinfang raised her head, her eyes as terrifying as those of an evil ghost. Sir Shiji took a deep breath and said, "Understood. I'll go prepare it right away." When Zhang Lilinfang got on the car, the phone in her hand suddenly rang. It was Zhang Qingrui's number. Zhang Lilinfang accepted it. 1 minute later, she hurriedly said to the driver, "Wait, go to the airport." Outside the airport, Zhang Qingrui and her grandmother hugged each other and cried. Zhang Lilinfang was afraid that it was a dream. She held her granddaughter's face with both hands and looked at her pale face. "Rui, where did you go? Do you know that I almost... Zhang Qingrui also had a lingering fear in her heart as she slowly recounted what had happened in the past few days. She only remembered what she had experienced. The entire underground palace collapsed suddenly. I took advantage of the chaos and finally escaped. Eldest Miss Zhang's face was still filled with fear. She grabbed her grandmother's hand and told her what had happened. In the back seat of the car, Zhang Lilinfang touched her granddaughter's face with tears in her red eyes. She kept saying, it's okay, it's okay as long as you're back." After the two enjoyed the joy of family reunion, Zhang Lilinfang sighed. 20 years ago, there was indeed an excellent team in the underworld. But all of a sudden, there was no news about them. I didn't expect that one of them was your university supervisor. She shook her head. That Qin Fong was also a poor guy. Anyway, it's okay as long as you're back. Since Qin Fong died, there's no need to investigate. Rui, you can't tell others what you've seen in the underground palace. Do you understand? Zhang Qingrui forced a smile. Kai Wenji, Zhang Jiao, the underground palace and those light wolves. Nobody will believe me even if I tell them. Zhang Lilinfang said, "Some things in the world are not as clean as what we see on the surface. Before I married into the Zhang family, I've heard many more bizarre things, but there's no evidence." Old Mrs. Zhang shook her head. "Forget it. Let bygones be bygones. It's not important anymore. But you said there was a treasure thief group. I have to ask about it carefully, in case it's a source of trouble." Zhang Qingrui recalled the memory in her mind. "I remember that man was called Snader. They were a group of people from different countries and seemed to be rich." Zhang Lilinfang nodded, patting Zhang Qingrui's hands. "Don't worry about it. This is our country. It's not a place for outsiders to act presumptuously. I have my own arrangement." Zhang Qingrui nodded. She suddenly bit her lips and plucked up her courage. "Grandma, I don't want to be with the Zhong family." Zhang Lilinfang kept silent for a while. Under Zhang Qingrui's uneasy gaze, she nodded slightly. "Really?" Zhang Qingrui looked at her grandmother in astonishment. The experience in these days was too magical, which made her stronger than before. Zhang Lilinfang looked at Zhang Qingrui. "For me, you're the most important. Nothing can be compared with you. Besides, if you didn't mention it, I'd consider it carefully." "Grandma?" Zhang Lilinfang shook her head. "Don't think about it now. I'll take you home to have a good rest. I've arranged your Uncle Shiji to take care of the shop for you temporarily. Don't go anywhere for the next few days. Stay by my side." "Okay." In the basement of Qin Fong's house. After getting off the plane and seeing Zhang Qingrui get on the car, Luoqiu and Yi came here. Since they were back in their own city, it was much easier to come to this place. But he didn't expect to meet Qin Shuyu here. After coming out from the underground palace, he didn't see her nearby. Qin Shuyu seemed to know that Luoqiu would come here again. The moment he and Yu Yi walked out, This extraordinary woman had been sitting here quietly with her eyes closed. The corpse in the basement had disappeared. It should have been dealt with by Qin Shuyu. Luochio looked at Qin Shuyu. I thought you'd send the professor off for the last time. Luochio didn't meet Qin Shuyu again from Gao Rui's hometown in front of Ulaanbaatar to the burial of the professor. Of course, if the Taoist cultivator was indifferent, then there was nothing to say. Qin Shuyu opened her eyes. I'm not Gao Rui's daughter. There's no need to send me off. Don't worry. I'm not interested in Qin Fan's property. I found his will in the safe here. I'll deal with it later and sell it. Then I'll send it to Gao Rui's real daughter. That year, Gao Rui's daughter was replaced by Qin Shuyu. Of course, she was the only one who could be found. Of course, Luochio didn't care about the follow-up. He came here because there was still a corpse to be dealt with. The professor had been missing for so many days. If the school felt something was wrong, it would be discovered sooner or later. Luochio nodded. He didn't intend to say anything. He looked at Yu Yi, meaning, go back. Wait a minute, please. Unexpectedly, Qin Shuyu stopped Luochio. She took out a simple wooden box and opened it in front of Luochio. This is the relic of a senior monk of Tibetan esoteric sect. I'll use it. How long can I stay with you? Boss Luo was stunned for a second. Even though customers would have some strange requests, Boss Luo didn't know what to say. But what the hell did she mean by staying with him? I shouldn't have woken up at this time, Qin Shuyu said indifferently. But the sudden breakthrough made my cultivation in this life almost wasted. And I also left some very bad traces. I need to stay with you and feel at all times. She took a look at Luochio and then at Yu Yi, saying seriously, I need to get rid of the fear in my heart so that I can continue my cultivation. It was good to have a guest who had made a deal. Why? Of course it was because they knew how to do it. They would directly throw out something they would pay for and then put forward a request. Luochio directly reached out and touched the relic. After thinking for a while, he said indifferently, 2 years. Chapter 128. Genius 1. Second, remember, love, divided by little. Say net, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Boss Luo, who was taking off his shoes at the entrance, was immediately glared at by sub-editor Run, who came over excitedly. Love Go Little Say Net Corinne Xiling, with her arms akimbo, was quite imposing, but even a cat couldn't be scared away, let alone Luochio, who was already used to it. Without saying anything, Luochio changed into slippers, walked into the living room, got a glass of water, and sat on the sofa to drink. Sub-editor Run, who had been following Luochio from the moment he entered the door until he sat down, couldn't bear it anymore. With a fake smile, she pulled Luochio's ear to her face. I say, you are ignoring me, right? Yes. F***CK. You really admit it? Rin Xiling opened her mouth in surprise, and the words in her stomach were abruptly stopped. However, as the current head of the household and the legal mother, Rin Xiling sneered, it seems that it's time for me to teach you how to be a human. Luochio first waved his hand to slap Rin Xiling's hand that was pulling his ear, and then took out a bag of beef jerky from his backpack. Rin Xiling took it, tore open the package, took out a piece, and began to gnaw. Don't think that a bag of beef jerky will solve the problem. No one disappears like you. Didn't I send you a text message? Rin Xiling snorted. A short message, and you disappeared just like that. Don't you feel embarrassed? Scenery photos should be available every day. Luochio again took out a bag of milk candy from his backpack. Rin Xiling snorted and tore open the packaging. She unwrapped a piece and threw it into her mouth. Don't think that a pack of milk candy and a pack of beef jerky can stop me. Therefore, Boss Luo turned the backpack over and put all the food on sub-editor Ren's legs. It's enough for you to eat until next week. Rin Xiling glared at him. Are you trying to make me fat? Luochio rolled his eyes as he massaged his shoulders and walked towards the room. I'm tired. If there's anything, we could talk about it tomorrow. At this time, Rin Xiling, who was tearing apart other local specialties, said, All right, your old Uncle Ma will be officially discharged the day after tomorrow. Let's have a meal together. Your Uncle Yi Yin will also take the time to come over. The door was closed. Uncle Yi Yin. Luochio turned on the light in the room. After a moment of silence, he suddenly walked to the wardrobe. After opening the wardrobe, he took out a box that was hidden in the wardrobe. He hadn't opened this box for a long time. Thinking of this, Luaccio opened the box and took out the thing inside. Tenor, a medium-toned saxophone. He stretched out his hand and touched the engraved words on the top of the tube. "Happy birthday, from Yin." Luaccio smiled. He missed the days when he learned this instrument from that uncle. Subconsciously, Luaccio picked it up and gently put it to his mouth. Yesterday once more. When the low but powerful music slowly came out of the living room, sub-editor Ren's anger suddenly disappeared. She smiled with relief. "For the sake of these letters, I forgive you." Ren Xiling gently rotated the sweet candy on the tip of her tongue. Unconsciously, she also remembered some things that happened yesterday. Brat. Anyway, it was wet. Eyes. Shinshin Food Company, Limited, Office. Juga, help me print this information. Okay, right away. Juga, remember to order lunch. Okay, perhaps it was an illusion, but Juga seemed to be in a good mood these days. His clumsy body walked back and forth in the office. Suddenly, he became very diligent. He always rushed to finish the work before the end of the day and was the first one to leave the office immediately after the end of the day. The speed of rushing out of the office was like adding special effects. A curious colleague asked, "Did something good happen?" That's why he smiled like a pig when he went to the toilet. No, nothing. But no one got the answer. In short, Juga was the first one to leave the office successfully today. Juga's mood couldn't be simply described as good. It was honey. Yes, it was like eating honey every day. It was so sweet, and he was never sick of it. Why? Every day, when he came home from work, he could eat a hot meal. Even the moment he opened the door, Hanako would wait for him and put the slippers for him. The only thing left was to say, "Do you want to eat first? Or take a shower first?" Or, "That's it." The originally messy house was messy every day when he came home, accompanied by various sour smells of single men. But now it was different. It was neat, clean, and even emitted a kind of fragrance all the time. When he went out in the morning, he could hear the words, "Be careful on the road." When he came back in the evening, he could hear the opening words, "Thank you for your hard work today." It was the same today. Juga showed a satisfied smile, eating the egg-fried rice made by Nanako. Although Nanako seemed to only know how to cook egg-fried rice, Juga felt that he would never get tired of eating it, because at this time, Nanako must be sitting opposite him, quietly looking at him. By the way, Nanako, Juga still couldn't look at this almost perfect girl properly. "What's the matter?" "No, I just want to ask." Juga paused and said, "Every time you watch me eat, aren't you hungry?" Nanako shook her head, smiled sweetly, and said, "Because to be able to watch Juga eat, I feel very happy." As if he was shot by Cupid's arrow, Juga felt that he was really going to die, a kind of feeling of dying without regrets. It's almost time to put hot water for Juga to wash up." Nanako at this time quickly stood up and walked toward the bathroom. Speaking of washing up, Juga couldn't help but start to giggle, thinking about what happened these days. A man and a woman alone in a room. More or less he would have some thoughts of excessive hormone secretion. But every time he saw the almost perfect smile on Anako's face, Juga had a feeling of pouring cold water on his head, feeling that this kind of thing was like blasphemy. He also began to think a lot of questions. For example, what should Nanako do in the future? Nanako appeared in front of him out of thin air, or it could be said that she walked out of the phone. She has no identity. How could a person with no identity live in the society? Could she only stay in this rented house for the rest of her life? If he is not at home, will Nanako feel bored and lonely? Thinking about it, Juga subconsciously asked, Nanako, will you be unhappy to be alone?" Nanako at this time stuck her head out, still smiling. "No, as long as I think that Juga will come back soon, I will be very happy." Sure enough, I can die without regrets. Such a good girl. Juga suddenly took a deep breath and said, How about we find time to go out for a walk?" Juga felt that it was too cruel to let such a beautiful girl hide in this small place. So he couldn't help but have the idea of taking her out for a walk. "Juga, where do you want to go?" Zhuge thought for a while and said, "This weekend, how about we go out for a walk?" I haven't thought about it yet, but I will definitely think about it. I'm looking forward to it. To go out with Zhuge. Nanako suddenly held her face and said shyly, "Is this a date?" Chapter 129. Genius 1, Second Remember Love, /go/little. Showa Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. Qin Shiyu felt a little bad. She subconsciously looked at the thing she was holding in her hands, a set of clothes. To be exact, it was a set of clothes similar to what the woman in front of her was wearing, a maid suit. Although I think it's enough for me to serve the master alone, it's totally enough, very enough. But since you, as a guest, bought the time to stay with the master, Yi said with a smile, so you can stay in the club for 2 years. And because you didn't explain too much, you can only move in the lobby, the kitchen, and your room. You can't enter the lower 3 floors of the club. Qin Shiyu didn't intend to explore this place at first. Her idea was very simple. 500 years ago, she made a deal with the former boss, and it was also the first time she felt that horrible door from the former boss. But at that time, her cultivation time was still short, so she didn't have a very intuitive understanding. Although she was frightened, it didn't affect her much. But now, she was no longer the weak Taoist cultivator of that time. If she didn't meet Luochio when she woke up with broken cultivation in this life, she would probably just waste her cultivation in this life, and she could just start all over again. But this was the second time she felt that horrible door. This was not as simple as broken cultivation. Qin Shiyu had entered the secular world to cultivate many times in the past 500 years. She was no longer the same as before. Her Taoist heart had been polished very well. However, it was broken by that weird door. Her Taoist heart became shaky and showed signs that all her previous efforts would be wasted. So she had to do something to stabilize her Taoist heart. The best and the simplest way was to face the source of this fear. So when Yi said she could only move in a limited number of places, Qin Shiyu didn't feel unhappy. But what was the matter with this set of clothes? But she soon knew the answer. But even if you, as a guest, bought the time to stay with the master, this was the second time Yi emphasized this matter. Qin Shiyu silently looked at the excessively beautiful and indifferent face in front of her. Although she didn't express too much, her tone obviously contained dissatisfaction with this kind of request. But that doesn't mean you can eat and stay here for free. Yi finally explained what she meant. So from now on, until the time limit of your purchase expires, you will stay here as a temporary worker. I allow you to follow me and serve my master. After hearing that, Qin Shiyu frowned as she felt something was wrong. Why can't I stay here as a guest? That Saraira is my transaction fee. I can stay here for a long time and enjoy your services. The servant girl said with a smile. Miss Qin, have you forgotten what you asked for at the beginning? What you said was only to buy time to stay by master's side. Of course, if Miss Qin wants to regain her status as a guest, I won't mind. However, based on your request when you made the deal, I think you can stay for the next 2 years. It's just that you can only sit at the entrance. After all, that place could be considered as staying by master's side. So, this was the third time he had mentioned it. As expected, he was very dissatisfied, right? She had made a mistake. She didn't expect this girl, who was gentle in front of the new boss, was such a scheming person. Qin Shiyu sighed in her heart. Unfortunately, the contract has been completed. She had a feeling that she had dug a hole and jumped into it herself. Qin Shiyu exhaled slowly, nodding her head. Where's the dressing room? I've cleaned up the utility room at the end of the second floor. From now on, you can live there. Yi smiled. Is this the reason why Qin Shiyu looks like this now? Luochio, who was sitting in front of the counter, had just finished listening to the servant girl's retelling of the cause and effect. He subconsciously looked at Qin Shiyu, who was wiping the glass of the cabinet by the window. Well, how should he put it? Although she was expressionless, maintaining her usual indifference to Luochio since she regained the memory of Yusanyang, she was still wiping the glass. But why did she feel that she was being bullied? She felt bitter in her heart, but didn't say anything. Master, you don't like Miss Qin's clothes? Yi suddenly asked. In Luacio's eyes, Yi should be the type who had a strong interest in dressing up. But now it seemed that she was not only interested in dressing up herself. Luacio subconsciously looked at the clothes he was wearing, which was also chosen by Yi, shaking his head. Just do as you say. He brought the tenor from home today, dismantled it, and started to examine and repair the parts one by one. Yi just stayed by his side, quietly. Suddenly, the bell in front of the door rang, but it wasn't a guest who came in. It was Tae-Yenzi. The old guy still had that weird mix-and-match style, but the catfish-like beard on his face had been shaved off. Well, unexpectedly, he actually looked good. Master, you're finally back. These days, I'm Yu Sanyan. Tenzi said the first half of the sentence respectfully, but the latter half was filled with anger, pointing at Qin Shiyu and laughing wildly. Be asterisk T-Sich. 500 years. Finally, I meet you. Ha ha. Black gas rolled around the furious Tae-Yenzi, as if it was blessed with special effects. 500 years. Be asterisk TCH. You made me unable to see the sun for 500 years. It's time to settle the score. Go to hell. Tae-Yenzi stepped on the Big Dipper steps, pinching a seal with both hands, and the black gas around him rolled around like dark clouds under the gale. His afro hair was also swaying unsteadily. Heaven and earth have the right laws. The Jade Emperor controls the golden light. With a furious roar, Tae-Yenzi pushed out the seal with both hands at the same time. At this moment, the black gas around his body rushed out like a gale, like toppling mountains and overturning seas, like thousands of soldiers and horses, like hundreds of riders charging, like riding alone. After leaving Tae-Yenzi's side, the surging black gas turned from strong to weak, slower and weaker. Finally, it disappeared before it touched Qin Shiyu. It was as light as the clouds and the wind. Tae-Yenzi was stunned, looking at the seal with both hands blankly. He didn't believe it. Heaven and earth have the right laws. The Jade Emperor controls the golden light. He pinched the seal again and pushed it out crazily. The black gas gushed out again, but this time it didn't go too far. The old ghost stood there blankly, as if he had received a huge blow. Then he remembered. He had turned into a black soul now, so he didn't have any of the magic power he had when he was a cultivator. The black gas that gushed out was merely something that he had forcefully exhaled. In fact, it was like a fart. But Qin Shiyu revealed a disdainful sneer after being hit by Tae-Yenzi twice in a row. This is F asterisk King embarrassing. Little junior sister, it's been 500 years. How are you? Chapter 130. A genius remembers love in 1 second/small. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. At first, it was because he had met his enemy from 500 years ago, and he was enraged. When Tae-Yenzi realized that he could only release some useless black smoke, he was naturally embarrassed. However, he didn't panic completely. After calming down, Tae-Yenzi began to think quickly about the situation in front of him. He realized that the current situation was a little grim. Why would Yu Sanyang appear here? Why does she look like she's working hard? Why is she wearing the same clothes as Miss Yi? Master, Tae-Yenzi could only look at Luocio. Although I don't know if your Jade Emperor's golden light was originally very powerful, but can you withdraw your posture now? Luocio put down the rag in his hand. This is Miss Qin, the Yu Sanyang you knew back then, and she will live here for the next 2 years. Don't bother her for the next 2 years. I like peace and quiet. Master, this lowly servant has the heart of a snake and scorpion. How could you? Tae-Yenzi was furious. However, before he could finish his sentence, a strange black flame suddenly appeared under his body. He heard Yu Yi coldly say, Tae-Yenzi, have you forgotten your own identity? Are you questioning Master's orders? As the black flames gushed out, Tae-Yenzi sensed the terrifying aura that made him tremble. He finally realized that the gap between him and this seemingly weak girl was only the tip of the iceberg. He instantly trembled and lowered his head, suppressing his anger and hatred towards Qin Shiyu. This subordinate dares not. Behave yourself and remember your current status. This subordinate understands. Tae-Yenzi didn't dare to say anything. These black flames were too terrifying. At this moment, Luochio felt that Yu seemed to have played the role of the bad guy. So he looked at her and said, "I'm a little thirsty." Yu hurriedly withdrew the black flames, turning around lightly. Yu understands. "Master, please wait a moment. I'll prepare right away." Luochio nodded. Miss May not only walked into the back hall, but also called Qin Chuyu over. Luochio looked at Tianzi, who didn't dare to move. "She's only going to stay here for 2 years. Come here." It seemed that some information had been revealed. Hearing this, Tianzi hurriedly raised his head, walking to Luochio's side. Luochio continued to wipe the parts he dismantled from the saxophone. "Before I left, I asked you to watch over Zhuge. What happened these days?" Tianzi hurriedly said, "According to Master's order, this old Taoist. I've been observing Zhuge's actions these days. Master, this guy doesn't make any progress. Even if a beauty falls into his arms, he doesn't do anything. He just smiles like a fool every day, as if he's already satisfied. This kind of guy was simply a complete piece of trash. Master, I really regret to have found such a patron. Please give me another chance. I'll definitely find a first-class patron." Luochio said indifferently, "Oh, you're denying your first achievement so soon? No matter what, he's already used the most precious thing of ordinary people as the transaction fee." Tianzi said with a sad face, "But that's just the most common soul. Alas, this old Taoist deliberately influenced him and humiliated him at the same time, arousing the hatred in his heart." Tianzi then glanced at Luochio, saying thoughtfully, "I've heard Black Soul number 9 say that a soul with strong hatred, sadness, and other negative emotions is also a kind of high-quality soul. I didn't expect that Waste didn't have any intention of revenge, but actually made such a request." So far, Luochio hadn't seen a soul with strong hatred, but now they were discussing Zhuge's problem. Boss Luo suddenly said, "Tianzi, do you feel that the quality of your soul is not high because you didn't manage to make Zhuge hate you, so your first achievement is only average, so you feel a little uncomfortable in your heart?" As expected, Black Soul couldn't hide in front of the boss, so Tianzi had a nod. Performance, performance. Only with good performance could he obtain stronger abilities from the club. It wouldn't be like just now, where he almost suffocated to death but only managed to blow out a breath. It was simply too embarrassing. He couldn't keep this 500 years old face, especially in front of his biggest enemy. That kind of feeling was needless to say. "Then how about we make a bet?" Luochio suddenly said. Tianzi was stunned. "A bet?" Luochio said softly, "I bet that Zhuge can become an excellent customer." Tianzi hesitated. This, Luochio's eyes turned. "If Zhuge still maintains his original appearance, I'll deduct 50 years of your service time. But if Zhuge becomes a little better, you'll have to add another 50 years of service time." Tianzi was really fed up with the feeling of being under others everywhere in this place, especially at that moment. After witnessing the horror of Miss Maid, Tianzi's dream of walking to the top of the world fell back somewhat. Obviously, if he could free himself from this oppressive place a few decades earlier, it would also be a good thing. After thinking about it, if he won the bet, he would gain 50 years of service time. Even if he lost, he would only be enslaved for another 50 years. Anyway, he would be enslaved for the next 500 years, so he didn't care about another 50 years. "Okay, I'll bet on it. I hope the master won't hurt me. Let time pass by. I only care about you. I'm willing to be infected with your aura." How long is life to be able to find a bosom friend? When he took out the key and was about to open the door, Zhuge heard a voice from inside the door. At this moment, there was only Nanako in the rented house. Zhuge was stunned. It turned out that Nanako liked to listen to this kind of old song. The sound of the stereo in the rented house should have heard the sound of the door opening, so the sound suddenly stopped. Zhuge soon saw Nanako walking quickly. "You're back, Zhuge." Zhuge quickly nodded and handed the food and vegetables he bought from the supermarket to Nanako. He was not as nervous as he was at the beginning. Zhuge could now speak naturally and fluently in front of Nanako. "The food is ready. Come and eat." "It's ready again?" Zhuge was stunned. He had some thoughts in his mind, but he had been restraining himself from thinking about it, let alone asking about it. He was afraid that the doubts in his mind would eventually become a key. He still felt that he was in a fantasy fairy tale. He was afraid that the key would open the door of this fairy tale dream and bring him back to reality again. Let time pass by. No matter what it was, as long as it was Nanako, it was enough. What's wrong? You keep looking at me without eating. Do you not like to eat? Nanako looked at Juga's motionless appearance with some disappointment. Juga shook his head. No, I just thought about where we're going tomorrow. Really? Yes. No matter what it was, as long as it was Nanako, it was enough. Juga nodded lightly and revealed a smile. Yin 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 PS1. Plan update, 1/2. PS2. Thank you to the first leader of this book, Shueisheng. Chapter 131. Genius 1, second remember love, go/small. Shua Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. As a result, the only place he could think of was the park. Originally, he planned to buy some new clothes with Nanako, but Juga, who always bought clothes online, had ordered some with Nanako a few days ago. He didn't want to spend his first important date in a random ready-made clothing store. More importantly, a man who had never visited a physical clothing store didn't know where to look for cheap, affordable, and beautiful women's clothes. Eating, Nanako didn't seem to eat much, so Juga subconsciously ignored this problem. As for watching movies, because I don't have much to spend and often stay at home, although the rental house is very small, it has unexpectedly installed a high-performance projector. During this period of time, as long as I'm at home, I've spent most of my time watching movies, right? He had no interest in life and didn't know what to do on a date with a girl. While he was working, he kept looking for strategies on the internet, but he couldn't understand most of them. The final destination that he understood was a hotel and other places that were convenient to move around. He swallowed his saliva. The main thing was that he knew how to read the atmosphere and take the initiative. Even if he simply walked in a quiet place like a park, he could quietly walk to a deserted place and then % and asterisk hashtag yen%su. Damn, what am I looking at? Juga scooped up a handful of water from the wash basin in the toilet and splashed it on his face to wash his face. Then he began to fiddle with his hair again. He specially combed his hair to look like an adult's. He also intended to wear a handsome suit, but he found that he actually didn't have such a thing. Juga looked at the mirror, patting his cheeks slightly hard, and then took a deep breath, walking out of the park's public toilet. He couldn't let Nanako wait outside for too long. Nanako, have you waited for a long time? It's okay. Nanako smiled. Where are we going next? Juga quietly glanced at the path leading to a quiet place in the woods, swallowing his saliva, and then suddenly pointed to the other side of the park for tourists to enjoy the flowers. Let's go there. Okay. Is it? As long as you like it. Then let's go. Juga took a deep breath, walking in front. What woods? He didn't even have the courage to hold hands, although it seemed that Nanako wouldn't mind something like that. What the hell? Tai Inzi, who had a sharp afro, looked impatiently at the action pattern of his first customer. He couldn't help but think, this guy is as timid as a mouse. He wants to have sex, but doesn't have the guts. He is so timid that he, the Black Soul Envoy, is anxious. However, Tainzi soon felt relieved. Who cares? In the end, this guy would continue to be like this. He didn't expect Juga to have any changes. In this way, he would be able to win the bet with the club's boss. 50 years. But he was still unhappy. He kept staring at such a good-for-nothing. Tainzi followed him impatiently. But why did the boss bet with me? Although it seemed that his side had a higher chance of winning, Tainzi didn't think that the club's owner was kind enough to find an excuse to reduce his enslavement time. That was why he made such a bet. Is there something I don't know? Thinking of this, Tainzi couldn't help but start to plan something. The red Mini was driving slowly on the road. The reason why Ren Xiling could be seen following the traffic rules was that Officer Ma's car was following behind. Of course, the driver was Officer Ma's wife, who didn't drive often. Ren Xiling was also afraid of being scolded. She just picked up Officer Ma from the hospital and was now at the restaurant where they agreed to celebrate his discharge. Why did you choose such a far place? Ren Xiling said casually. How would I know the place your Uncle Yi chose? Ren Xiling looked ahead. I can't say that your Uncle Yi is actually still in the mission, so the place where we eat this time is actually next to his squatting spot. As long as the mobile phone is connected to the monitor, he can work and be lazy, right? But since he replaced her, it's been so long, is that guy still squatting at home and not going downstairs? Rin Xiling couldn't help but think secretly, but she promised Yi Yin that she wouldn't intervene in this matter. By the way, do you remember where you used to live in the bun shop? Rin Xiling suddenly said. Yes, Rin Xiling said, as if chatting. 2 days ago, I passed by the old town for an interview and wanted to walk there. The former boss and lady of the bun shop seemed to have passed away, but his son left his job in the city and came back alone to inherit the bun shop. Luochio nodded, turned on the car stereo, and said softly before closing his eyes, "If there is time, go back and walk." Well, okay. Next time, let's talk about your girlfriend. Drive. Tut. In the memory, Yin was not the kind of Iron Man, and naturally, he was not the middle-aged fat like Officer Ma. What should he say? It should be said that there was no difference from the memory. He still liked to wear a simple black windbreaker. When he was young, Luochio remembered that Yi Yin was already dressed like this. He was still as calm and handsome as before. Yi Yin had already booked a room in the restaurant. When Luochio and company opened the door and came in, he was quietly brewing tea by himself. F***CK. Yin, what kind of crappy place did you find? The mountain is long and the river is far. You want me to die from the heat. Officer Ma, who had just been discharged from the hospital, probably had been stifled in the hospital for too long. At this time, he directly opened a can of cold beer, ignored his wife's nagging, and drank most of it in one breath. He casually sat down and continuously pulled at his collar. Uncle Yi. Yi Yin chuckled, then looked at Luochio. His eyes softened a bit, and he softly said, "You're here." In Rin Xiling's eyes, she unexpectedly found that Luochio was actually a bit reserved or even nervous. She knew this kid's character too well. Should she say that he was an old man or a mature young man? Anyway, no matter who he met, he could use facial paralysis to talk. Sub-editor Rin suddenly felt a bit lost. Sure enough, this guy who came back from France has a very special position in her baby's heart. As a mother, I can't compare. Don't stand, sit. Yi Yin smiled again, pointed to the seat next to him, and said, "Sit next to me." Yin 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 PS1. Plan update, 2 halves. Chapter 132. Genius 1, second remember love, go/little. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Officer Ma Howd was an honest person. A bottle of cold beer obviously couldn't quench his cravings after being squatted in the hospital for so many days. Thus, after begging, he finally got a bottle of 52 proof paper from his wife. He said that since it was Yi Yin who paid for it, it didn't matter how expensive it was. Because this guy's salary was higher than his bonus was more than his, and his grades were better than his. Ma Hao didn't have the slightest bit of jealousy. Instead, he was really happy for this good brother of his. He was proud of his achievements and sincerely said that Yi Yin was the second person he admired in his life. He drank nearly 2/3 of the bottle of paper alone. Luochio couldn't remember how long it had been since he sat in such a lively scene for more than an hour. He, who always liked to be alone, obviously didn't feel any discomfort. It was as if he was suddenly knocked down from a lonely peak, like a child who had just learned how to climb a mountain. He drank the tea that Yi Yin got from who knows where and listened to the people at the table talking about things he had heard before and things he had never heard before. However, the words were getting more and more interesting. But there was no mention of a certain taboo word in everyone's heart. Luochio knew that he was the youngest here. Everyone was taking his feelings into consideration, so he held back and didn't say anything that could really touch their emotions the most. After 3 rounds of drinking, Mahoud probably really drank too much. He suddenly knocked his chopsticks on the glass, burped, and stood up shakily. Everyone listened. During this time, I really have to thank my wife for taking care of me every day. He originally thought that he wanted to use this as an excuse to continue drinking, but he didn't expect that to be the case. In order to thank my wife for her hard work, I've decided to sing a song. Rin Xiling cursed on the spot. She had also drunk 2 or 3 glasses of white wine. and her face was flushed red. At this moment, she hurriedly covered her ears with both hands and hid far away. However, Ma Hao didn't seem to mind at all. After glaring at him, he walked to the TV in the private room and started to pick a song. He picked up the microphone and said, "In the past few days in the hospital, there's a place upstairs that plays a song that I like very much. It makes my heart itch. I'll sing it for you right now. Don't laugh, don't laugh." He was Officer Ma, a sharpshooter and a heavy smoker in the police station. In fact, when he was young, he was also a tyrant in the KTV room. This restaurant had some history. The decoration was still in the style of more than a decade ago, and the display screen was still the same. The so-called KTV was naturally incomparable to a professional KTV room. But this was probably a memory of their time. Luochio saw that although Officer Ma's wife had a mocking expression on her face, her eyes were filled with anticipation. Ian didn't look at her. He lowered his head and played with the 2 glasses that he hadn't finished after drinking a few mouthfuls. If I hadn't met you, where would I be? How would my life be? More than a decade ago, or long before he was born, there was probably such a scene. A group of people fooling around. People say that 10 or 20 years is a cycle of change. Luochio felt that their time was actually still here. I'll send Olma back first. Ian, if you have time, come to sister-in-law's house. I'll make your favorite sweet and sour carp. Ma Hao staggered out with the support of his wife. Luochio asked for a blanket from the waiter and covered Run Xiling's body. This woman later drank and fell asleep on the sofa. This woman is really difficult to take care of. Ian made a pot of hot tea and asked Luochio to sit down beside him again, but she still said that she would take care of you for a lifetime. Luochio didn't say anything. He had heard the first sentence from Ma Hao many times, but the second sentence was obviously the first time he heard it today. Ian took a sip of hot tea. You're not like your father. You're like your mother, the one who's not around. Luochio had almost no memory of his birth mother. He only heard from his father that she was probably a completely different type of woman from Ren Xiling. But he didn't want this meeting to fall into such a heavy atmosphere, so he smiled and said, "It seems I should exercise more." Ian looked seriously at Luochio's eyes. They were serious and old-fashioned, like a stone statue. But he suddenly laughed. He suddenly reached out and pinched Luochio's nose and said, "I thought you forgot how to joke." Luochio was stunned. The number of times he had joked in the past few years could be counted on one's fingers. It couldn't be described with words. Ian shook his head and suddenly said, "Are you still playing with guns? The membership card of the shooting club that I gave you is for life." Luochio thought about it. He had touched 2 guns during this period of time, and they were real guns. One was Jean Zifu's gun, and the other was the nun's gun. So he nodded. Ian said again, "What about the saxophone?" Luochio also nodded. Ian touched himself and said softly, "I have only held a gun in the past few years." That day, his father died in the mission. On the same day, another female agent in the same team died of serious injuries 2 days later. Looking at the expression on Yi Yan's face, Luochio knew that even though a few years had passed, the female agent who died was still Yi Yan's most beloved person. Another day, Yi Yan looked at Luochio and said with a smile, "When I am free, accompany me to shoot a few guns." Okay, from Taiyinzi's point of view, Zhuge was probably a hopeless man. Old Ghost tried his best to integrate himself with this era, but no matter how hard he tried, he still couldn't adapt to everything in this era. Taiyinzi felt that the people in this era, especially the men, had completely lost the masculinity and ambition of 500 years ago. A real man should shed blood when he is alive. However, even though he knew this guy was a hopeless man, the bet was still a bet. This kind of thing was hard to determine until the very last moment. If Zhuge changed even a little bit, there was a possibility that he would lose. Since that was the case, why not let him wake up from this beautiful dream? Taiyinzi quietly left Zhuge with a sinister smile on his face. Zhuge, who was strolling in the park, was thinking hard about what he should talk about. He really didn't have any experience in this area. There were a lot of people like him in society who didn't know what to say when they were with girls. Nanako, are you tired?" After thinking for a long time, Juga finally squeezed out such a sentence. Nope, that's true. Actually, we didn't walk for long. Juga awkwardly touched his head. What should I say? No matter what the question was, although Nanako would answer immediately. But after answering, Juga suddenly didn't know how to continue. Sure enough, it's really hard to get along with girls. Let's go over there and sit. Okay, cheer up. Juga silently cheered himself on. But at this moment, suddenly like it was raining, his hair that was combed into an adult's look was suddenly wet. Juga was stunned and looked at the sprinkler in the flower trough. It actually broke at this time and crazily sprayed water, which even fell on his head. It really looked like it was raining. Well, let's go. Juga subconsciously shouted. I'm wet. I'll go over there to wipe it. At this time, Nanako suddenly lowered her head and trotted away from Juga's side. Juga was stunned. It was the first time he saw Nanako so flustered. What exactly is Nanako? There was no toilet nearby. He saw Nanako ran behind a tree and subconsciously walked there. Taking a deep breath, he didn't know why the curiosity in his heart suddenly increased. Juga didn't know what drove him and carefully peeped at the side. Nanako shouldn't have noticed, right? Looking at Nanako squatting on the ground, Juga's eyes peeped bit by bit. All of a sudden, Juga felt his heart beating crazily. That kind of fear almost made him scream out loud. Juga's hands simultaneously covered his mouth and suddenly squatted down, no longer daring to look at what he saw. Instinctively, he felt a kind of fear. What he saw was Nanako squatting on the ground, but her head was separated from her body. She was slowly wiping her face. Not human. Chapter 133. Genius 1 Second Remember Love /Go /Little. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Luochio looked at Juga quietly. When the customer came, no matter what he did, he couldn't refuse. It was about 3:30 in the afternoon. That is to say, you left Nanako here and came here right away, didn't you? Juga shook his head. No, I didn't dare to look at her at that time, so I found an excuse to go home and another excuse to come out. In that case, Miss Nanako must feel very disappointed. Juga was silent for a while with shock, and then said with a trembling voice, She? What is she? Why Ken? He really didn't want to recall the scene he saw not long ago, and hoped to hear the answer he wanted to hear from this strange shop owner. Clay. Luochio didn't intend to hide, because he didn't ask before, he didn't tell him. Now that he asked, he would tell him. The club had always been honest. Clay? Juga opened his mouth, full of disbelief. How can it be? Customer, do you think that Nanako, who has appeared in front of you, is also impossible? I'm not. Juga shook his head, and then said angrily, But what I paid was, Luochio suddenly said indifferently. Customer, do you need me to evaluate the value of what you paid? Our club does have a set of evaluation standards for the customer's soul. Juga was startled, and suddenly had an inexplicable fear. He was afraid to hear some facts from the shop owner, something he could almost always hear from his childhood. I'm not. He suddenly didn't know what he wanted to express, because Nanako was made of clay, so he angrily questioned. But recalling his request, he only wanted Nanako to return to his side, and didn't define what Nanako was. Originally, it was just a virtual character in a mobile game. Just clay. Juga suddenly understood why Nanako never ate in front of him, why she only knew how to cook egg fried rice, why he never touched her when she was washing. Even in the park, after being wet by the water, she became so flustered. Nanako was afraid that if she got wet, her body would melt, would scare him. Was she thinking like this? Juga swallowed his saliva and finally asked what he really wanted to know. Does she have her own thoughts? It had been some time since Nanako appeared in reality. Hanako would always accompany him. She would watch him eat, watch movies with him, chat with him on the internet, and even play games with him. She never felt bored. This was very abnormal to begin with. This was originally abnormal. Yes, how could there be such a girl who quietly took care of everything and always maintained that sweet smile? Isn't this what you want, customer? Luochio said, Someone who cares about you, who is willing to chat with you, and who won't look down on you. Juga suddenly became silent. All of a sudden, he felt an unprecedented irritation. That was, even if he was ridiculed by the people around him, even if he was directly rejected after confessing to a girl in puberty, even if he was just a small role in the office, he had never felt this irritation. I'm going back. Juga suddenly stood up and walked toward the club's door without looking back. Welcome again, customer. When Juga walked out of the door, he heard his boss's voice behind him. He paused for a moment, but in the end, he didn't say anything. He pushed the door open and walked out. Juga didn't make any deal on his second visit. Yi came over, holding the scented tea that Juga didn't drink, and put on the tray held by Qin Shiyu. Qin Shiyu didn't say anything, silently turning around and leaving. She still didn't understand why she was doing this kind of work. There's no improvement. Yi was now beside Luochio, saying softly, but it's a bit strange to be suddenly wet by the spray. Luochio took off his mask and then held the teacup, thinking about the bet he made with Tianzi, suddenly asking, 50 years should be very long, right? Maybe it wasn't long for Yi, but for Luochio, 50 years was twice as long as his life. Yi only answered Luochio's question with a smile. Forget it. Let's not talk about this. Luochio shrugged. By the way, how's the research on the Godstone going? After leaving the underground Toon Palace in Ulaanbaatar, the Godstone was handed over to Yi for safekeeping. Boss Luo, who had always been good at housekeeping, naturally felt that it was more cost-effective to let the knowledgeable servant girl study it than to spend time to identify it himself. Yi didn't disappoint. At present, according to Zhang Jiao's description, it's been tested for radioactivity and material analysis. The material shouldn't be known. In addition, the radioactivity had a very active period. I detected a very weak ray, which can speed up the metabolism of cells. So it can come back to life? Luochio asked curiously. Yi nodded. Well, yes. But the radioactivity on the Godstone has been declining. I think it's the characteristic of the ray itself. It can't be released forever. In general, this may be a meteorite falling from outer space. Meteorite. Luochio nodded. What's with the soul absorption? Yi said, it should be the instinctive reaction of the meteorite itself. If the soul is also regarded as a spirit, what it absorbs is actually something like spirit waves. What's interesting is that this meteorite seems to be breeding a very special life. It's alive? Luochio was surprised. Yi said with uncertainty, it's hard to say. I've never seen such a thing. But it shouldn't have its own consciousness. Even if it absorbs spirit power, it seems to be just an instinctive reaction. Maybe this is the key to its birth. Next, I plan to do another X-ray fluorescence spectrum and extreme general analysis. If there are further findings, Yi will tell Master immediately. So Boss Luo, who didn't understand what X-ray fluorescence spectrum and extreme general analysis were, could only nod. As the boss, he more or less felt a little awkward in front of a prodigy. Well, I'll go out for a while. Ren Xiling was still sleeping in that restaurant. Juga put his hand on the door handle of his rented house, but couldn't open the door for a long time. He didn't know what he was hesitating about. He just felt that his mind was blank. The scene he saw kept lingering in his mind. But the door was open at once. As usual, Nanako stood at the door. Juga, you're back. Juga stared blankly at this sweet, smiling face, but his body instinctively took a small half-step back. Juga, what's wrong with you? Nanako looked at him confusedly. Are you not feeling well? Nanako stretched out her hand, touching Juga's forehead. That face that had once made him feel incomparable happiness was getting closer and closer, but the scene of the head being cut off also became incomparably clear in his mind at the same time. Clay. All of a sudden, she seemed to have turned into a pile of mud standing upright in front of Juga. A pile of mud, approaching him. Horrifying. Closer and closer, closer and closer. Don't. Almost instinctively, or perhaps out of the fear in his heart, Juga subconsciously waved his arm, slapping away the hand that was about to touch his forehead. Juga. Nanako stared at this scene in a daze. The sweet smile seemed to disappear. Did you see it at the park? Juga also stared at his hand in a daze. What on earth? Step back, step back, step back. Juga felt a burst of dryness in his mouth, turned around, and ran down the stairs like crazy. Juga, when he was downstairs, he seemed to have heard a sobbing voice calling out to him. But all he wanted to do was to run as far away as possible. His happiness seemed to have been shattered in an instant. Yin 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 Yin. Chapter 134. Genius remembers love in 1 second divided by small. The internet provides you with wonderful novels to read. What am I doing? Wandering in the city streets at night, Juga suddenly lost his goal. Go back, or not? This question has been lingering in his mind. Aimlessly walking to the nearby commercial street, Juga sat on the bench for customers and habitually turned on his phone. After the games app was deleted by his colleague, he didn't download it back. He didn't feel weak anymore. And now, he was even more irritated. You have logged in your account. Although the game was deleted, the game's discussion platform software was still there. It was full of die-hard fans of the game. Originally, he himself was also a member of this discussion platform. The game will have a new version update and maintenance next week. Please prepare to save your data and log off early. This update will add a new character, Monster Girl. At the top was a content about the game update, and below it were lines of excited posts. Monster Girl? I'm gonna die. I'm gonna make a slime mother awe. After Juga scrolled down the slider a few times, he suddenly lost interest and was a little disgusted. It sounds nice. Monster Girl, if she really appears in front of me. After all, reality is reality. No matter how cute she is, when 2 dimensions become 3 dimensions, it will be horrifying. But if it was before today, perhaps he would be one of the happy people. Juga laughed self-deprecatingly. He sat there in a daze until the commercial street became completely deserted. Other than the convenience store that was open 24 hours a day, there were no other shops that were still open. Sure enough, there is no free lunch in the world. Juga shook his head, hesitated, and finally rushed home. He came back home in a hurry, so he didn't bring anything with him except his phone. Even if he wanted to stay outside, he didn't have an ID card to register. He could only bite the bullet and go back. He thought that although Nanako, at least, she wouldn't harm him. He silently went back to the rented apartment downstairs, and when he walked to his own floor, he found that the door of his apartment was only ajar. Juga was stunned for a moment before he carefully opened the door. The lights inside were not even turned on. Juga swallowed his saliva and turned on the lights in the room. This kind of unit was very small, so he could see everything clearly at once. But Nanako was not here. She was not in the shower, the small balcony, or the small kitchen. Nanako was no longer here. Juga sat on the floor in a daze with his head lowered. He didn't feel happy, nor did he feel disappointed. He just felt empty. He tried his best to recall the scene where he slapped Nanako's hand away, the scene where he left her sight. Juga looked here, there, and at the door. Suddenly, he wiped his face with his hand and continued to look here, there, and at the door. His stupefied expression suddenly twitched. His shoulders trembled slightly. For some reason, he felt as if Nanako was about to disappear from his life. Maybe it was better this way. He couldn't treat Nanako as he did at the beginning. Maybe it's better this way. Nanako, she must be sad because of my behavior. Thinking back, when he ran down the stairs, he heard the voice calling his name. It was obviously anxious, hesitant, and frightened. Beep, beep, beep. Juga opened his eyes with a headache and subconsciously turned off the alarm on his phone. His head was groggy, and his whole body was sore and uncomfortable. It turned out that he slept on the floor, and a night had passed without him noticing. Juga subconsciously looked at the door and found that it was still ajar. He was slightly disappointed. He didn't know what he expected. Perhaps, after waking up from the dream, he had to go back to reality again. After that day, Juga didn't see Nanako again. As usual, he hurriedly got up in the morning and missed the first bus. He could only rush to the office in a hurry and was the last one to catch the office. Juga, we don't have the ink box for the copy. Go to the warehouse and get one. He repeated the same work every day and was so busy that he didn't even know what he was doing. Juga, send this sample to the factory. It can be put into production next month. He was just the most ordinary errand boy in the office. He had no dreams, no future, and no friends. Let me tell you, I participated in the TV station's Diamond 120 Seconds program and was shortlisted. I'll be performing in 2 days. Remember to watch the TV and cheer me on. It's such a popular program. How can you not watch it? Come, come, come. I still have tickets for my friends and family. Listening to that, the man who deleted his game was proud of himself. He just felt something like, oh, so it's like that. There was nothing to be happy about, nor was there anything to be unhappy about. After all, it wasn't his problem. Anyway, this kind of thing wouldn't happen to him. Zhuge, it's time for you to lose weight. If you continue to put on weight, there won't be enough seats for us. He had always been the target of ridicule. It was like this in the past, and probably in the future. Anyway, he was used to it, right? Anyway, he was used to it. There's no more seats here, but you insist on sitting here. Are you trying to take advantage of me? Disgusting. He could only stand and squeeze. He didn't know when, but he walked out of the subway in a daze and bought some simple food at a nearby convenience store. Anyway, he was alone for dinner. He could eat whatever he wanted. Zhuge, you're not young anymore. It's time to think about your future, right? Where are you coming back? I'll arrange it for you. We know our own situation. I don't have any requests. I'll make do as long as you can take care of the family and live well. He still received a call from his hometown once a month and listened to the nagging that he had memorized long ago. The next month, it was still the same nagging. I'm the man who will become the king of Hang X. This is my path. I'll protect this smile. Back in the past, the lights were off and the screen was on. He felt that time would pass faster this way. He felt that this guy with the straw hat was very handsome. He felt that this life of endurance was really long and smelly. But he still unknowingly continued to wait. He logged into his account from CF to LOL to WoW, from midnight to dawn. F***CK. Are all my teammates retarded? He smashed his mouse fiercely and cursed at his stupid teammates. But, damn, do you know how to play mid lane? Where are you? Did your house explode? He scolded very energetically. But damn, cheat, report, report. He would be angry because of this. But dragon, devour my enemy. He could not help but shout excitedly when he was excited. But why did he not feel happy at all? But why did he feel that time was longer than before? Why was it that the sky was not bright yet? He couldn't remember how long it had been since he looked in the mirror. 2 days? 3 days? 4 days? Day by day. Day by day, day by day. He longed more and more to be able to hear, "Be careful on the road," when he went out. Day by day, he longed more and more to be able to hear, "It's been hard today," when he came back. But day by day, he climbed the dim stairs and walked into an empty rental house. Even now, he was not willing to go back. Once he went back, there was no way to make himself happy. Although it was short, Zhuge found that he had completely lost the strength to climb the stairs. Completely. I am too bad, too bad. Finally, he sat on the stairs in the corridor, covered his face, and sobbed alone. After an unknown amount of time, Zhuge felt someone patting his shoulder. He subconsciously raised his head and saw a figure in the haze. He blurted out, "Nanako, what the hell?" However, it was indeed a horseman's voice. "You are a man. What can't you do? Do you have to squat here and cry?" "What?" "Landlord." Zhuge was stunned and reached out to wipe his face. I should have paid the rent," the landlord said impatiently. "I am not looking for you. These 2 days, the people downstairs have been complaining. They say that they often see people sneaking around in the middle of the night, and they say that they can hear the sound of a woman crying. I am a righteous man. How can there be any demons or ghosts? I have to find out tonight." What did you say? Are you deaf?" The landlord pushed Zhuge away. "Don't just stand there. The person who installed the surveillance camera is coming up. Go away." What did you say? I dare you to say that again. Middle of the night, what? Unexpectedly, the tenant, who was timid, was like an angry beast at this moment, grabbed his clothes, and pushed him to the edge of the wall. The landlord was suddenly frightened. They said that there is a female ghost wandering around in the middle of the night, crying. Zhuge let go of the landlord, lowered his head, and muttered to himself, "It is Nanako. Nanako." She was crying. That day, when I slapped her hand away and looked at her as if she was a monster, she would be sad. She has her own thoughts. Even so, she's still by my side silently. I want to find her. 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 Looking at Juga going down the stairs in a flurry, the landlord patted his shoulder and then shook his head like a bitter gourd. The black smoke flashed, and the landlord changed into Tienzi's appearance. Tienzi, do you want to continue the bet? Can Juga find Nanako? Master, Tienzi's face suddenly became very ugly. Looking at the club boss who was leaning on the fence and running down the stairs to look for Juga in a flurry. When we made the bet, I added some rules to ensure fairness. What did I say? Luochio turned his head and looked at Tienzi. You can only observe and can't do anything secretly. Well, Luochio said, then you do something and I do it once. Let's call it tie. How about that? As Master says, yin 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 yin. Chapter 135. Genius remembers love in 1 second divided by small. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. He couldn't find her. He couldn't find her anywhere. He couldn't find her on the streets near the rental house. He couldn't find her even if he ran to the park a few streets away. Juga was already drenched in sweat, but he still couldn't find her. Excuse me, have you seen a girl this tall? She's really beautiful and cute. She's very sweet when she smiles. Her name is Nanako. The passers-by asked one after another. Some shook their heads and said they didn't know, while others just waved their hands and walked away. Juga suddenly felt dizzy and had difficulty breathing. He held onto the trees by the roadside. His legs were so heavy that he couldn't move. For the first time in his life, he hated that he only had this much physical strength. He hated that he didn't train properly. He had a lot of time. Panting, he had a feeling that Nanako was beside him, silently looking at him from somewhere. She had her own thoughts. She wasn't just clay. Juga sat on the horse and lowered his head. That day, when he looked at Nanako with disdain and fear, was it like a knife that pierced through her feelings and thoughts? Juga felt that he was no different from those who had always ridiculed and disdained him. People used colored eyes to separate him from them. He also used the same eyes to separate himself from Nanako. It was the same. It was the same. He was the same as those people. Although he didn't say anything or express anything, he had never forgiven those people. Naturally, Nanako wouldn't be able to forgive him, right? This life of mine is really too bad. Juga sat quietly. The people on the street looked at him and continued to walk. He looked particularly fragile with his face full of stubble, like a homeless person on the street. If he couldn't make Nanako forgive him, would it be a waste of effort no matter how hard he tried? With a trembling hand, he reached into his pocket, the black card that he had been hiding with him ever since Nanako appeared. The familiar pinewood door, the familiar bell, the familiar shop owner, and the familiar decorating style that was filled with a strange atmosphere. After all, this was the third time he had come. The boss sat there quietly, as if he had been waiting for his arrival for a long time. Juga quietly pulled out a chair. This time, he didn't need anyone to ask him to sit down. Love, go little say, Netka, sir, is there anything I can help you with? I want to find Nanako. Juga took a deep breath and looked seriously at Luochio. In his eyes, there was a firmness that was not present in the previous 2 times. Originally, this was not what I planned to do. Luochio just sat there like that. Please go ahead. Juga took a deep breath and said, at first, I wanted to use something in exchange for Nanako's forgiveness. Whatever, as long as she can forgive me, as long as she can forget the harm I did to her. Luochio said indifferently. We can do that. Juga shook his head and said, but I gave up this idea. I realized that I didn't have that qualification. I have hurt her. If I use such a despicable method to get her forgiveness, then what qualification do I have to continue to see her and face her? I don't have this qualification. At first, I was afraid. I ran away from her. I left her sight timidly. I have never hated myself so much. Juga smiled bitterly and said, in the end, I still can't do anything. In the end, I'm still that Juga who can't accomplish anything. But this time, he said loudly and heavily, this time, I hope to use my own efforts to get Nanako to forgive me. So, I just want to know where she is. Luochio thought for a while and asked slowly, Guest, allow me to be curious. How do you plan to get Nanako's forgiveness? Juga was startled. I don't know. I just want to know how to find her. Luochio nodded. If you want to find her yourself, as long as she wants to avoid you, I'm afraid you will never find her. Do you believe that? Juga nodded helplessly. How about using 3 days of your life? Juga nodded his head without any hesitation. As you wish, honorable guest. Luochio stood up and walked to Juga's side. He put his hand on his shoulder. The scene in front of him began to spiral away from Juga's sight. When he regained his vision, he found that he was downstairs in his rented apartment. This place. Juga looked at this familiar place in astonishment. Nanako is here. Luochio held the black cane in his hand and pointed upwards. To be precise, she is in your room. How is that possible? Luochio said indifferently. When you left, she came back. After you came back, she left in advance. She calculated the time of your return and prepared in advance. Juga's shoulders trembled. She is, Luochio suddenly said. She should not be bored. After all, Miss Nanako has been working more recently than before. Looking at the puzzled Juga, Luochio said to himself, she tidies up the room every day, but she is afraid of being found out. So, after tidying up, she returns to her original appearance. She will watch the movies and videos you watch every day and then delete the records and so on. Then, she must be more lonely than before, right? Juga could not imagine how she spent those days. So, she's been doing so much for me all this time. Juga looked at Luochio in a daze. I also want to do something for her. Can I buy something from you? Of course. You've always been our esteemed guest. Juga took a deep breath. There's a place I want to go. TV station. The live broadcast of the Diamond 120 Seconds program. As the most popular program in the city, no, in the nearby provinces, it had a terrifying viewership rating. On this kind of stage, even if you get off the stage in 8 to 10 seconds, you have the capital to brag. Mr. Chun Jiaming, get ready. It will be your turn to go on stage in 1 minute. Chun Jiaming took a deep breath. In 1 minute, he will be on this big stage and become famous. At that time, F*CK, the food company sales king. I will become popular and earn a lot of money. Chun Jiaming jumped a few times to loosen up his tense nerves. He began to adjust his breathing. But at this moment, he seemed to have a blur in front of him. He rubbed his eyes and saw a huge figure walking out of the changing room. Chun Jiaming was stunned. Juga, why are you here? This is the backstage. But you're here to cheer me on, right? Ha ha ha. Thanks. Unexpectedly, Juga suddenly rushed in front of Chun Jiaming. Without saying anything, he raised his fist and ruthlessly punched Chun Jiaming's stomach. This punch is for you deleting my game. You. Chun Jiaming fiercely jerked his knee again and once again hit the other party's abdomen. Although he was a fatty, the strength of his leg really couldn't be underestimated. Chun Jiaming immediately held his stomach and squatted down, vomiting out the bitter water. It was so painful that he almost fainted. This time, there is no reason. I just want to hit you. You? What about you? I also don't like you from the start. Juga took a deep breath. Suddenly, he jumped up and ruthlessly pressed Chun Jiaming down. Such a heavy blow made the nearby boss Luo feel pain. He shook his head and knocked Chun Jiaming with his cane, making him faint. Chun Jiaming, are you ready? Juga glanced at Luochio. Seeing that he didn't respond, he quickly responded, ready. Without changing his clothes, he opened the door and walked under the gaze of the program assistant. He walked to the backstage preparation area. When the host on the stage finished his introduction, he walked up to the stage. The host was stunned. For a moment, he couldn't say anything. He actually retreated step by step to the edge of the stage. Isn't that Juga? It's Juga? Where is Chun Jiaming? F***CK. What's going on? Under the magnesium light, Juga walked step by step to the center of the stage. He took the microphone from the assistant and glanced at the audience in the studio. There were more than 500 people, including the jury and 7 or 8 cameras. He had never appeared in front of so many people, nor had he ever stood under the gaze of so many people. But he knew that there were countless people in front of the TV. He didn't dare to imagine how he came here. Fear and nervousness made his palms wet. He had to hold the microphone with both hands, afraid that it would fall at any time. Juga realized that even if he opened his mouth to speak, it would be extremely difficult. He subconsciously lowered his head, not daring to look into the eyes of the audience and the eyes of the jury. Nanako is looking at me, thinking of her staying in the small house alone, quietly taking care of things and quietly restoring things to their original state. Juga's heart ached, and he raised his head. My name is Juga. My full name is Juga Kong. My name is Juga. I'm not Juga. I've been a very timid person since I was a child. I'm not smart, and I'm also very fat. I failed my exams. I couldn't even finish running 200 meters. Before I graduated from college, I didn't even have a girlfriend. But now I have someone who has always cared about me. After graduation, I just did the most useless chores in a food company. I thought I would be like this for the rest of my life. I want to work hard, but I'm afraid of failure. Although I seem to be fine, I'm always concerned about other people's views. I don't have any extra activities. When I get home, I can't do anything. I play games, I watch cartoons. In other people's eyes, I'm just a person who escapes from reality. I'm indeed a person who denies myself. I've always thought about why it's always others who despise me. But recently, I suddenly realized that it's not others who despise me. It's me who despises myself. I met a very beautiful and cute girl who understands me, supports me, looks down on me, watches those childish cartoons with me, and watches me play games by my side. But I actually despise her. I actually hurt her. I'm really the worst person, Juga said with a self-deprecating smile. Even just now, I directly knocked out my colleague and replaced him to walk up here. When the production team below the stage heard this, they immediately panicked. The director suddenly slammed the table. What are you panicking for? F***CK. Continue the live broadcast. This is the ratings. Continue. Thinking back, she's been silently doing a lot of things for me, but I don't seem to have done anything for her. So, please give me the time for a song. Juga silently lowered his head. Let me say what I want to say, what I want to express, my apologies, my thoughts, my everything. I only care about you. If I didn't meet you, where would I be? How would life be? Should I cherish life? Nanako, I'm sorry. Now, maybe I know someone. Living an ordinary life. Now, please look at me. Look at me, I'm right here. Let time not rush by. I only care about you. I'm willing to be infected with your aura. I won't be afraid of anything anymore. So, I beg you, don't let me leave you. Juga, she was crying. She was sitting in front of the TV when the program suddenly changed. At first, she was stunned, but when she saw that clumsy figure appear, she couldn't take her eyes off him. She used her hand to cover her mouth. She felt that it wasn't enough, so she covered her mouth with both hands. Juga, I really want to see you. Yin. Chapter 136. Genius remembers love in 1 second divided by small. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Tainzi listened to the whole story while kneeling. Of course, he didn't really kneel on the ground. He just felt it intuitively. It wasn't because this guy's singing was so bad that he even ran away in the middle of the song. He even started to cry at the end of the song. Instead, it was the hopeless guy in his eyes. When he stood on the stage, facing the hundreds of people in the studio, facing the tens of thousands of people in front of the camera, and even more people, he began to unreservedly peel open his heart. This guy started to transform. He didn't become so dazzling that he, as a black soul envoy, would scramble for him. But at this moment, there was obviously a kind of attraction. Obviously, this hopeless trash took a step to become a man with hope. At the end of the studio, his boss showed a smile. Tainzi knew that he was probably going to lose the bet. He didn't expect that he would overreach himself. If he had known this, he wouldn't have secretly let Juga see Nanako's true appearance. He didn't expect that this would become a trial for Juga to be reborn from the ashes. However, humans were a very magical animal. As long as they experienced a metamorphosis, their essence, chi, and spirit would be completely different. As a former Taoist, he naturally had a way to observe people. Master, I lost. Taiyinzi lowered his head. The old guy was a bachelor. At the beginning, he secretly tampered with the bet to win. He thought that even the boss of the club wouldn't be able to help him and wouldn't always pay attention to the Black Soul Envoy's actions outside. Obviously, that wasn't the case. Taiyinzi couldn't help but think that the Black Soul Envoys before him had more or less experienced the situation and had their own calculations. He followed Black Soul number 9 for a period of time. He felt that this big boss had extraordinary ability, but it was somewhat inconceivable that he could still remain loyal. But then he saw the horror of Yu Yi, and the boss of the club knew everything in secret. It seemed that in the long river of time, many Black Soul Envoys didn't have the heart to resist, but they were all worn down by this sense of powerlessness. In the end, they could only walk on the road of no return, liberation. Aren't you going to wait for Juga to hand over his soul before deciding the winner? Luochio asked curiously. Taiyinzi shook his head. There's no need for that. In any case, his little tricks would be exposed. Next time, it wouldn't be as simple as you do it once. I do it once, so we're even. Taiyinzi knew that the club's boss was trying to knock some sense into him. However, as an old ghost who had lived for 500 years, he was actually beaten by this young man, which made him feel a little awkward. Was it because he was regressing as he lived, or was it because he had been trapped for 500 years? The world had developed too quickly, and the way of thinking of modern people was no longer comparable to the ancient people of 500 years ago. Be more sincere. However, Luochio turned around and left quietly. Taiyinzi was stunned. Master, where are you going? The guest request has been fulfilled. Of course, I'm going back. Luochio twisted the black cane in his hand, then put on his hat and turned around to push open the security door of the recording studio. I still have a guest to see. Taiyinzi was stunned. Should he continue to watch Juga here or follow him back? Give me an explanation. Suddenly, thunderous applause broke out in the recording studio. Nobody knew when it started, but some people stood up. Like a fast-forwarded scene, the audience began to stand up one by one. They applauded vigorously. The flashing lights kept on, and the cheers in the recording studio were deafening. Juga felt that his whole body was hollowed out. His legs went soft, and he sat down on the stage. He did something that he had never imagined in his life, an incredible thing. It happened in just a few minutes, but he didn't know why. This feeling isn't bad. Juga subconsciously had such a thought, but soon, Juga got up. He didn't have time to feel this and respond to the enthusiasm of the audience. He didn't feel that he belonged on this stage. There were more important places waiting for him. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to find her. Bye-bye. Juga held the microphone and nervously bowed. Then, he ran out of the recording studio in a panic. Do your best. Be happy. Young man. Good job. Those were the voices of people who made way. It's him. It's that damn fatty. He knocked me out and stole my chance to go on stage. I've already called the police. Arrest all of you. I won't let him go. However, Juga, who was running out of the recording studio in a panic, ran into Chun Jiaming, who had woken up at some point. His colleague. Not only him, there was another colleague beside Chun Jiaming. Was it because he found that the one on stage was Juga and not Chun Jiaming? So he went backstage and found the unconscious Chun Jiaming and woke him up? Not only that, beside Chun Jiaming, there were two security guards from the TV station. Don't run. Who wouldn't run? Why would I do such a crazy thing? Juga turned around and ran. Not to mention how much he regretted it. He just felt that today was too crazy. It seems that no one is chasing after me. Juga subconsciously looked back and saw that Chun Jiaming and the others, who had been chasing after him, had fallen to the ground at some point. The four of them had probably tripped at the same time and were stacked together. When Juga saw this, how could he continue to stay here? He quickly ran away. Damn it, I've already lost the bet. At least I have more hope. Let's make my first performance better. My name is Nanako. Yes, at the beginning I was called Nanako. Since I was conscious, I was in a very small place, a dark place where I couldn't see anything. Until one day, all of a sudden, the world became bright. I was in a rectangular frame, and I saw different colors from the darkness. I saw something strange. Later I knew that it was a human face. Some strange things began to flow into my body. At the beginning, I knew that my name was Nanako, and the name of the one I saw, he was called Juga. From then on, every day, I could see him. Juga would give me a lot of clothes and would give me food at certain times. I didn't know what the so-called food tasted like, but it would turn into light and flow into my body. Then I would feel a sense of satisfaction. He would also talk to me constantly, and he would constantly show various expressions in front of me. But that magical rectangular frame wouldn't open all the time. When it closed, I would continue to fall into the endless darkness. Every time that happened, I would have a very strong thought. I wanted that frame to open, and I wanted to see that person. Yin, 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 yin. Chapter 137. Genius 1, Second Remember Love, /go, /small. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. I began to understand what it means to go to work, what it means to get off work, what it means to be human. I don't know why, but those things felt familiar to me. It was as if I had experienced them before. Sometimes I would have doubts, where did I come from? Later, it wasn't only when Juga opened that small frame that I could see more things. I began to come into contact with other things that were similar to me. I began to understand what data was, and also began to understand what I was. The character in the game was a character created by the user. As long as I connected to the internet, I could feel that there were many characters like me. I tried to communicate with these characters. I wanted to talk to them. That way, when I couldn't see Juga, I wouldn't feel bored. Yes, I began to understand what boredom was. But no matter how much I called, they ignored me. They seemed to be different from me. In the other world on the screen, it seemed like I was the only one that existed. I really wanted to leave this world. I didn't want to be shrouded in darkness. I really wanted to see Juga. I really wanted to chat with Juga, even though I knew that I could only use those written words to express it. But somehow, I felt that Juga knew. Even if it was just words from the program, Juga still treated me as his kind. If that was the case, even if there was a limit to the time I could see him every day, even if after every meeting I had to face the darkness again, even if I knew that one day Juga would be like other users and uninstall me, even if that day came, as long as it was now, I was willing to wait in the darkness. I thought that my days would continue like this until the day I couldn't see Juga anymore. He uninstalled me, but I didn't think that day would suddenly come. Once again, I looked forward to the screen opening. But this time, the person I saw wasn't Juga. Who was he? Why wasn't it Juga? Where was Juga? I saw the strange man smile outside the screen. I hated this kind of smile. He looked at me as if I was a clown. That kind of teasing smile. Don't touch it. That was Juga's gift to me. Don't touch it. Please don't touch it. Stop. This is the scene where I went with Juga. Stop. Delete? I suddenly felt a kind of fear looking at the delete option that appeared in front of me. Delete? Stop. Stop. Please. Please stop. Stop. Please stop. Please stop. Please stop. Please stop. Please stop. Please stop. Juga, where are you? I want to see you so badly. I want Nanako to come back to me. I'm willing to give all my soul. It was Juga's voice. Finally, I was able to see Juga. This time it was different. This time I didn't see Juga. This time I was able to grab both of his hands. His hands were big and warm. Great. It was really great to be able to come to Juga's world. Although I still had to wait for some time every day to see Juga, and the waiting time was even longer than before. But as long as he was here, I was able to have real contact with him and say things that I couldn't say before. It was really great. This weekend, let's go out for a walk. I couldn't even describe my feelings at that time. It was really my first date with Juga. It was no longer a moving scene through the screen. It was no longer a virtual scene that only I could see. This idiot. Why didn't he know how to hold my hand? He was only so familiar with it when he was playing the game, but this was already enough. In the future, there would definitely be a lot of opportunities. That was what I thought. That was really what I thought. It was just that my secret was discovered. The sudden spray of water splashed on my body, and I could immediately feel some of the secrets that I hadn't been able to confess to Juga. I ran away from Juga. I ran away without caring about anything. Not long after I came to this world, I knew that I couldn't touch water. As long as I touched it, my body would show signs of melting. I needed to wait for my body to dry before I could return to my original appearance. I knew that Juga might have seen the scene where I was wiping my body. I knew that he didn't say anything and just brought me back and left in a hurry. I knew that, but I imagined that Juga wouldn't come back. That was what I thought. Finally, I waited for Juga to come back. I saw the change in his expression. I didn't know what to do. I tried my best to be like usual. I wanted to get close to him. Don't. He left. This time, he was right in front of me. He carried me and ran away with all his might, no matter how much I called out to him. I could only watch him silently from downstairs. I followed him and followed behind him. I saw that Juga didn't raise his head anymore. I saw that he didn't have a spirit when he walked. I saw that he didn't smile anymore. I walked back to his room quietly. I tidied up everything. I put everything back to its original appearance. I sat on the floor alone. I waited for him to come back like usual, but many times I hoped that Juga wouldn't open the door. In that case, it seemed like I would wait for him to come back. But I knew I was still different from him. I knew a lot of things, even if Juga didn't mind, even if I wasn't a real person. I couldn't give him something that a real woman could give him. Aren't you tired? Suddenly, one day, a strange man appeared in front of me. He was wearing black clothes and a clown mask. I was scared at first, but this strange guy didn't do anything to me. He was very polite and could even be called a gentleman. He suddenly appeared in this room and asked me such a question. I didn't know how to answer his question. Wasn't he tired? I asked myself this question too. Later, I said, if I can't even stay in this place quietly, I have no place to go. He suddenly said, I have a worker in my shop. He brought me a customer recently, but this worker is actually a newcomer. He doesn't know anything. He seems to have gotten the wrong person. I still didn't know what he was talking about, but I didn't feel that he was malicious. Maybe I wanted to find someone to talk to. What attracted him wasn't the customer he thought. It was you who was brought by the new customer. Me? If you need, you can call me. Dear customer, no matter what your wish is, as long as... After leaving such an inexplicable sentence, this strange guy left a black card in front of me and then disappeared from my sight. It was Juga. He was there. He was there. For me, he stood on the stage that everyone was looking at. On the stage, he mercilessly peeled open his heart, layer by layer, and tore open his heart. I covered my mouth with both hands. I felt that I should cry, but I couldn't shed any tears. My body didn't have that kind of thing. I really wanted to tell him that I forgive you. I don't blame you. I want to see you. I really wanted to, but I couldn't even shed tears. I couldn't do it at all. I'm not a human. I can't be like an ordinary human. Juga and I really wanted to see him. I really wanted to see him. Finally, the black card suddenly burned in front of me. I saw a wooden door and heard the sound of a bell. I heard the strange man who appeared before say, Welcome. Well, Juga looked up at the small iron window on the wall. After that day, he didn't see Nanako again. Although he rushed back to his rented house from the TV station, he still didn't see Nanako. He saw that the TV wasn't turned off, but Nanako still wasn't here. He still didn't get Nanako's forgiveness. Juga smiled bitterly. He didn't know how he spent that night. The next day, some people came to Juga's rented house. Shu and Jiming came with some people. Juga didn't say anything and quietly followed him to the police station. This guy didn't hesitate to call the police and wanted to sue him. Juga didn't even care that this guy was gritting his teeth and cursing. He only felt that his punches and kicks were very satisfying. Why didn't he do it more? I won't give up like this. If one day can't make you forgive me, then 2 days, 3 days in this lifetime. Taking a deep breath, Juga looked at the blue sky outside the small iron window of the detention room. There was no confusion, only a firm thought in his heart. I don't need to be depressed before I get Nanako's forgiveness. I don't have the qualification to be depressed. Jugetsu, you can go out now. Someone is here to bail you out, but don't wander around and wait for the court summons. Who would bail him out? Zhuge was stunned, thinking that his parents who were still in his hometown would be alarmed. That would be a really troublesome matter. He walked out dejectedly, vexed about how he should explain to his parents. Perhaps he would be scolded right on the spot, right? After all, he did such a shameful thing. However, it wasn't his parents. Then who was waiting outside the door? Who was the person wearing a white big hat and a plain dress, standing there quietly? Who was it? Short hair. Wasn't it Nanako? Yin 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 yin. Chapter 138. Genius 1, Second Remember Love, /go, /little. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Is it Nanako? Or is it not? Zhuge was not sure. He asked a question, but the other party did not respond. The face with the sunglasses vaguely looked like Nanako, but the figure was slightly taller. But the other party did not say anything, directly walked to the nearby taxi, opened the door, and got in, then waved at him. It should be this girl who bailed him out, right? In the end, Zhuge still got into the taxi with doubts in his mind. Then he did not say anything along the way. The girl just looked out of the window. Zhuge wanted to say something, but in the end he could only lower his head in bewilderment. Do I know you? Although I thank you for bailing me out, but I want to get off. I want to find someone. Zhuge mustered up his courage. But suddenly, the taxi stopped. The place where it stopped was a park. Zhuge was startled. The girl had already got off the taxi and walked into the park alone. Zhuge scratched his head. He just wanted to ask clearly. There was a feeling in his heart that made him subconsciously follow her. The girl carried him and walked into the park. As they walked, the people around them became fewer and fewer. Zhuge looked around and suddenly remembered that he once strolled in this park with Nanako. Suddenly, the girl turned around and took off her sunglasses. Nanako. In an instant, the girl who took off her sunglasses almost overlapped with Nanako in his memory. But he quickly shook his head. Although they overlapped, there were still many differences between the two. It could only be said that the similarity between the two could reach about 60%. Zhuge subconsciously thought. At this time, the girl seemed to be a little annoyed, suddenly reached out and pinched her hair. My hair was cut off. Seems like it's still lacking a little. But this was Nanako's voice. This is... The girl walked in front of Zhuge and suddenly reached out to grab Zhuge's chin and pinched it hard. I just woke up and immediately ran out of the hospital to see you. Why do you look unhappy instead? The girl's eyes widened. Or are you saying that the words you said on TV were all lies? Zhuge really didn't know what this girl was talking about. Wake up? The girl nodded and walked beside Zhuge. Well, that day, I suddenly fainted and went to a dark place. I even forgot who I was. Until one day, you suddenly appeared in front of me. Zhuge opened his mouth in disbelief. However, when he thought about how even Nanako could appear in front of him, it didn't seem impossible. That person said, and it should be said that his soul had left his body and accidentally entered the data of the game. Since then, he has been trapped, the girl said in a distressed manner. If I had known, I wouldn't have moved around during work. It seems like I got electrocuted. Electrocuted? His soul left his body and entered the game's application. Trapped for a long time? Every day, I let a pig-headed guy make a fuss. If he's not giving me food, he's forcing me to change clothes. Are you a pervert? The girl turned around and suddenly put on a fierce face. Zhuge's forehead was instantly filled with cold sweat. I'm sorry, but naturally my soul has returned to my original body. Are you an idiot? Do you still need to ask? The girl said impatiently. I am sorry. He really couldn't understand what this girl was thinking. Finally, I meet you. Unexpectedly, the girl suddenly let go of his chin and hugged him. She buried her face in his chest. I am Nanako, silly. Nanako said that she will always be by Zhuge's side. Have you forgotten? It's Nanako. It's really her. Zhuge subconsciously closed his hands and hugged the girl tightly in his arms. Tears suddenly surged out. Nanako, it's really you. Yeah, you want to strangle me. Disgusting. Don't let your snot flow out. Disgusting. I'm sorry. It's about time for you to lose weight. Yes, Zhuge. This time you still don't plan on holding my hand? The girl snorted. I even asked the driver to come here. Plucking up his courage, Zhuge took a deep breath and walked to the girl's side. He grabbed her hand. It was not cold, but warm, soft, and boneless. The two of them casually strolled in the park and completed the date they couldn't finish last time. Right? Nanako, what's your original name? Zhou Yuanshan. The girl said softly. But usually it's not called this. Usually it's Meng Xiaoyu. Suddenly, Zhuge stopped. Meng Xiaoyu. He remembered who she was. She was the prototype of Nanako that he made as a reference. She was one of the original voice actresses for the game's advertisement. Then, customer, may I ask if there's anything you want this time? What else do I want? Zhuge sat there anxiously. He felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. He wondered if he was possessed. This was the 4th time he came to this place. I want to know if Nanako came here to make a deal. Zhuge finally gathered his courage. One day, Zhuge tearfully looked at the one day of life that was deducted from him. He got a definite answer. Then, what did Nanako use to make the deal? I asked her before. She told me it was a secret, but she wouldn't tell me. It's more expensive to ask about other customers' deals. But considering the relationship between the two of you, 1 year. Zhuge tearfully looked at the 1 year of life that was deducted from his life. He felt that if he couldn't get the answer, he wouldn't be happy for the rest of his life. Miss Zhou Yuanshan's consciousness was accidentally separated from her body. Of course, if she was in this state for a long time, even if her body was maintained by the machine, she wouldn't wake up. Of course, only 1 year of life was used to let her consciousness return to her body. Then, is there anything else you need? No. Zhuge quickly stood up and threw the black card on the table. He looked at the boss of the club and said, I don't want this thing. He took a deep breath and said seriously, I don't think I'll need it in the future. Luochio grabbed the card and turned it in his palm. I'm afraid it's not possible. After all, this is one of the proof of your transaction. Apart from a few transactions you've made, when your life ends, we will. Boss Luo walked to Zhuge's side and put the card back into his pocket. He patted his shoulder and whispered in his ear, Take away your soul. When Zhuge came back to his senses, he found himself standing outside the rental house. Zhuge suddenly smiled. Soul, that kind of thing. Now there's something more important than that. He took a deep breath and opened the door of the rental house. Welcome back. Zhuge, do you want to eat first or take a shower first? Or me, that kind of thing is no longer important. As long as I can live with her, that's enough. Yin 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 yin.